welcome to a special 40B edition of the Zoning Board of Appeals for Tuesday, June 9th, 2026. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First up, we have acceptance of minutes from the April 29th meeting. I trust all board members have read them and looked through them. Any comments? All right. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes?
Move to accept the motion, the minutes.
I'll second.
All right. Ms. Rutherford. Oh, she dropped off. All right. We will accept on 4 people. So,
Permanently.
Mr. Testa.
Aye.
Ms. Craig-Coman.
Aye.
Mr. Killaway.
Yes.
And I am a yes. All right. Next up, I want to... Oh, Ms. Rutherford, do you vote to accept the minutes?
I do. I'm sorry. I went to unmute and I accidentally killed the meeting, so I apologize.
Understood. I thought you were just running away from the question.
It's definitely the hardest question that will be asked tonight. So.
Yeah. All right. So I just want to set the stage a little bit because we've got a lot of stuff to talk through. So first up, we have the applicant will be talking about some minor architectural adjustments, some new renderings, some new descriptions, answering a request for having some measurements with regards to adjacent properties. We'll also be presenting the landscape plan that is revised from what we had before. Then following that, we're going to start talking a little bit about, we've got one other piece, which is that there was a question from the community about the Avalon agreement and its relevance to this discussion and whether or not there is any sort of conflict or interaction between the two of them. And I had asked Ms. Murray to give us an analysis of that. She has submitted a report, and we'll discuss that report. And then the other pieces are we're going to start to get into the nitty-gritty to look at what the requested waiver list actually is and what our possible list of conditions is that we would be looking at. And, I think as Ms. Murray has mentioned before, those are written with the idea of us voting yes, because it's much easier if we decide no to pull that back. So this is not a statement right now that this is what we are affirmatively doing, but is being written in that tone. All right, with that, let's bring up our applicant. Mr. Steinberg?
Thank you. David Steinberg, RCG LLC, representing the applicant, East Mill Housing LLC. Good evening. I put in, submitted the slideshow, so if we can start there. That is TAT's architectural. Yes, that one. Thank you. If we can start there. As the chair indicated, we have a few different items we're sort of cleaning up and can get onto some of the other questions as well. Where we're going to start was with architecture. Some of the discussion during the last meeting had to do with, in particular, the branch of the building that stretches out toward the residential neighborhood, the treatment of the roof, some of the design decisions there. Ed Bradford from the architectural team is here to present some thoughts on that. I got some distances from our civil engineer who did update his site plan that was submitted to integrate the new footprints that we'd submitted at the prior meeting. So he gave some dimensions. I think TAT has a few diagrams of the interactions of some of those distances from the abutting properties as well. So with that, I'll hand off, if we can jump right into the architecture. Terry, if you can go back to the other presentation.
Thanks, Dave. Good evening, folks. For the record, Ed Bradford, principal with TAT. And as Dave said, I have a relatively quick presentation to run through some updates since our last meeting on May 21st. start with the next slide, please. So this is just a summary of what we did here, as we understood it, at the May 21st hearing. And at that hearing, we did present, as Dave noted, an updated site plan with additional buffers and setbacks and the like. And we understood that was generally well received, that adjustment. In addition to that, as Dave noted, we were asked to come back this evening with the flat roof option of the design adjusted for that new site plan. We have that tonight. And then finally, again, as Dave noted, a bit more information on dimensions from the proposed buildings to the surrounding homes. And this first slide addresses that last point. This is an image that, or an exhibit that we showed at the May 21st hearing. And what it shows on the top is our layout as submitted in the original comprehensive permit application. And just below that is a graphic that we presented again at the last meeting showing the adjustment. And that adjustment, as I described on May 21st, was a shifting of the garage planned east about 30 feet. And that was, and then as well as creating that courtyard between the residential building that fronts on Prescott and the garage. And as we walked through at the last meeting, that really did free up a lot relative to that edge, creating a much more generous setback along the condition that we've been talking quite a bit about. As far as the specific dimensions we were asked to come back with, as Dave noted, we went ahead and looked together with the civil engineer about the dimension from, and that's shown on the lower exhibit, from the new wing of the building to 39 Prescott, and that's a dimension that was increased from about 58 feet to about 79 feet. That's measured building to the home, or the addition to the home at 39 Prescott. And then staying on that lower exhibit, 2 dimensions we've added that were asked about at the last hearing. The first is a dimension from the new building to the home at 24 Prescott, and that dimension is just about 80 feet. And then moving further planned south from the new building to the home across Prescott at 14 Prescott, that dimension is approximately 110 feet. So I think that hits on the dimensions, I believe, that we were asked to cover at the last hearing.
Yep.
And I'm not sure this was specifically asked for at the May 21st hearing, but these are sections that we presented at prior hearings and just wanted to update them according to the new site plan. So this first section, if you just scroll down a little bit in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a little graphic that shows that this section is basically a cut through the home at 39, through that buffer area, and then through our proposed wing. So this does show, again, that in this case, and now if you wouldn't mind scrolling up a bit, there we go. So this does show what is now a setback from the property line that has been increased to 54 feet in this particular case. And then we'll graphically have filled in, really what this does create is an opportunity, as we've noted, for much more additional landscaping, new, and we hope preservation of existing trees as well. And I think that will be covered a little bit more in the landscape presentation.
Okay, yeah, I was going to ask how much of those trees are actually there and how much of them are to be planted.
Yeah, the larger ones is our intent to show the taller preserved trees, and then the lower ones are newer trees. But again, I think Verdant can fill in more detail on that. And then finally, before we leave this exhibit, this is information that we have covered at prior hearings, but this does show the step back on our new building, and we have the relative elevations there just to give a sense of height of the proposed building at the step back to the home at 39 to give those relative heights. So generally the top of our building is a bit above the ridge at 39 Prescott, and then our step back is about 10 feet below the ridge at the home at 39 Prescott, relative heights. And then the next slide, please. And this, again, is another area that we're asked about at the last hearing. We just talked about the dimension from the new building to the home at 24 Prescott. This takes a section right through that street, that home, and our proposed building to show the relationship of the step back to the home and those relative elevations. So this is where we have a 17.5-foot setback from our building to the property line. And then the step back, you can see in the cross-section of the building where we are, the intent, again, as we've described, is to have a 3-story building present itself on the street and to recess the top floor back. So from pedestrian level, it's recessed and less apparent. So we have relative heights on this exhibit too, and you can see the looking at the ridge of 24 Prescott and the relative heights of the proposed building. And now I could just walk you through a few renderings. So these are all, the series of renderings are all vantage points that we have covered at the May 21st hearing, and they're all set up in the same sequence. So we're typically starting showing the view that we presented at the last meeting. Typically going to follow that with the flat roof version from the same vantage point. And then we didn't give up yet on the slope roof version, so we have some adjustments to that as well to share. So that last view showed the view we showed at the last meeting, and then same vantage point. Here is the flat roof version you've seen before, but this has been adjusted now with the building placed, of course, where it would be according to this adjusted site plan with the proper setbacks and such.
And again, I guess I'm sorry, I'm going to ask this stupid question again and again. So the trees that are sort of faded out that you're making, translucent here, those are currently existing trees, or are those trees that would be planted?
The taller ones, and we made them the next slide will show them not transparent.
Right. No, I understand. Right.
Those are intended to be.
Those are intended to. They're hard to model exactly, so I'll give that qualification.
Yeah.
But we understand the heights of the trees, the location.
Okay.
Again, verdant plans are bit more accurate.
Okay.
But this is our sort of.
The reason it matters to me is
Yeah.
just that, like, if it's a tree to be planted, it's very hard to plant a tree that is that big, right? And so, if you had a rendering there of a tree to be planted, it would be planted much smaller, and then 20 years from now, it might be that height.
No, the taller trees are our representation of
Understood.
existing trees.
Yep.
Yes. So that, and for that reason, each of these views from this vantage point, anyway, we did show the existing trees as both in a transparent layer, so you could see through them, and then in what we think would be a more accurate version of a summer view when there's foliage on the trees, in this view, and that's what this view shows.
Now, you mentioned having both the sloped roof and the stepped roof.
Yeah.
And, I would say that my impression of both the board and the neighbors' responses has been mixed between which one they would lean for. So is there a direction that, I guess that leaves you a little bit with some leeway to decide which one you think makes sense, but like, is there a leaning here between which one you would prefer?
I think as a team, we have a slight leaning towards the flat roof version.
Okay.
I think it is just the mass of it is a bit less bulky compared to a sloped flat roof version.
Yeah.
That has the step backs a bit more broken up.
Yeah, I mean, that's my impression. Every time I look at the sloped roof, I think it looks bigger, right? But the flip side is that it does architecturally look more like the rest of the community. And so, like, I hear both sides of it, and I think we've heard both sides of it. I just, at some point, we have to make a decision, right? Like, we have to be able to approve based on a specific design, and so.
I mean, most of the feedback I feel like we've gotten is that the massing is the biggest concern, not the style. Although, I mean, I think we've heard some about it, but in terms of like the volume of comments, would say it's been more about massing, and the flat roof, I think very clearly feels smaller, even though it's no volume smaller for living space.
I mean, that's my impression as well, is that it because you're not basically cutting that corner with the roof, it looks a little bit smaller.
Well, my impression of the comments is that they really don't care about either. They want the whole thing greatly reduced,
that is
and
fair.
that this is minimal changes, so
Sure.
I don't think,
I think I've
Yeah.
heard twice about like style. I think I've heard several times about size
yeah,
overall.
yeah, I agree. To the degree that that's been commented on, I agree.
All right. So I think that's probably then the direction forward for us as we consider like waivers and conditions and what site plans we're referencing. I think that's probably the direction we're going to go.
So the next slide, please. So as and then we'll keep moving on to the next view. Oh. And then the next one. So the next vantage point is from upland, and that is on the right, the existing home at 24 Prescott. And this is a view again that we showed on May 21st. And then the next slide, please. So this does show the, as you asked at the last hearing, the flat roof version showing the step backs. We did actually make one minor adjustment to this view. If you look at the facade as you front it, you'll notice that the section to the left has been pushed back about 4 feet. So there was a comment made at the last hearing that the facade was sort of broad, kind of long. And so we made one adjustment, pushing that back 4 feet with the intent of breaking it again into these smaller parts. So that is a change from the massing that we showed last time. And then, just to keep things interesting, we did make some tweaks to the sloped roof version. So the adjustments here are very actually similar to what I just described. The view that we showed last time had a more broad elevation. This simply, like the flat roof version, pushes a portion of the back of the elevation back 4 feet, and then has a gabled portion proud of that. And again, the intent is just to break down that massing a bit more compared to what we shared at the last hearing. So that same idea, though, applies to both versions, sloped roof and flat roof options. And then the next slide, please. This view is almost unchanged from the May 21st exhibit that we showed. The only change here is that we did spend a little bit of time and modeled the building beyond our proposed building. That's the building at existing building at 50 Hyde Street. And at the last hearing, that was just shown as a red blob without windows. And we just wanted to do that to drive home the idea that the approach to the architecture here is when you get to the corner of High Street and Prescott, that way the architecture does transition to the brick architecture of the mills. And so wanted to better show the context that sits near it. And then the next slide, please. This is the last vantage point. Here again is the May 21st view, looking back up Prescott. That's 14 Prescott on our left at the corner of High and Prescott. And then here is the same vantage point with the flat roof version showing the step back from the 3-story portion to the floor above. You can see the change in color and texture as well to try to reinforce that change. And then the last of the exhibits here is the updated sloped roof version. And really the biggest change there is just the, not quite visible from this vantage point, it's more visible from the view that I showed earlier from upland, and it's the introduction of some adjustment to the facade that fronts just on Prescott, so less of a change from this vantage point. And that does cover what I wanted to hit tonight.
Any questions? Comments? Thoughts?
I'm trying to decide how I feel about the slight adjustment in the run of the side of the elevation on Prescott there. I feel like it does break up the eye a little bit. I don't know, do anyone else have thoughts about?
You mean
Whether
just like
that's
the
like
extra
a-
4-foot step back?
Yeah.
It's good to add a little relief to a broad facade. But you did that by pushing that back, right? Not by bumping the other portion out?
We pushed it back, yeah. So that's actually not represented in the plan that was just shared, the landscape plan, so we would be pushing that facade back 4 feet.
Does that change the distance that was measured?
No, because the majority of the facade is still that distance, right?
Well,
The
yeah.
the measurements were to the closest point.
Right, but I don't know if the closest point was exactly that spot or not.
The new design, it's almost a parallel face, right? The old design, it was a corner. Now it's.
Right, but the 4-foot variation that he
Oh,
said
for
is
the
not
whole
on
thing,
this,
yeah.
that he submitted. But it
Yeah.
looks like the closest point is on the other side from that 4-foot relief
Yeah, the
setback.
current setback is 19 and a half feet, so we would be pushing back 4 feet for a portion of that facade, so that would go, go increase by 4 feet from there. So we get 23 and a half feet for a portion of that facade.
I mean, I think the neighbors would like a lot more than 4 feet.
I was gonna say, that, like,
But as far as visually of what is there, I think it's an improvement. But just the aesthetics of that building, but not satisfying to, the entire mass
Yeah.
being close to the neighbors.
I think we are going to hear feedback this evening that is not what they're looking for, right? That is, they would, the number I keep hearing is half, right? Or some variant of half. And, I think we've talked a number of times that's unlikely as a major change, that is not, and it's also not something that we are allowed to ask for as a 40B process. Like, we cannot ask for it to be smaller for the sake of being smaller. It has to be connected to a specific waiver that they are requesting. And it has to be a strong enough need in that waiver that it overrides the need for the housing. And that is a very, very high standard, right? As Ms. Murray talked about last meeting, that is something that in her entire experience, she has seen 2 things actually win, right? And that's not a straightforward process. So we have to think of this as like, it has to be something really, really outside the norm. And it's not just size outside the norm, it is a specific waiver that they are requesting that is massively outside the norm. Is that a reasonable description?
I mean, I did note that one of the waivers is specifically for that property line, right?
Right, it is, but we would have to say that waiver request is
Right.
an extreme outlier that would override the value of the housing that is being built.
No, understood. Just saying, there is
Yes.
a waiver that could be attached to
Yes.
some level, but not to half.
Yep. And I think the one that we were the most concerned about, which was the distance from the property on 39 Prescott, that is no longer a waiver being requested.
Right.
Ms. Rutherford, do you have any thoughts or questions? All right, I hear none. Mr. Testa, any thoughts? Okay, all right, thank you. Let's move on, I think, to the landscape plan.
Yes, and we have joining online Michael from Verdant. I was just going to introduce some of the, in the 3 weeks since our last meeting, a lot of things are being integrated into the new footprint of the building, so I want to at least summarize what they were addressing in the landscape design. First, obviously, we set the building back much further. There's an infilling of that buffer and how that was being treated. The goal was to enhance or preserve as much as we could in that buffer, getting a little more elbow room
I'm sorry, do you
along
mind
it.
holding just,
Yep.
I'm gonna pull that shade down. I'm having a hard time focusing on what you're saying because I'm being blinded. Oh.
You know what? How about,
Is that not,
Just a balance.
is that not a blackout shade at the top?
how about you come and sit over here? I'll move over.
Or these spots are pretty shady too.
Let's shift over a bit. Because it's actually a fairly thin stripe that is.
Is that, there are second sets of shades on all of these, no?
That's what I think too.
Yeah.
They're black on chairs.
I'm fairly certain.
They look like it's in one.
Do any of us know actually how to bring them in?
I mean, I can see little shades on the side.
Yeah.
That's not just a balance for the
Are those for the other ones?
blind, that's there.
Oh, okay, yep. Never got. I guess when I'm blinded by the sun, I cannot see what shades.
All right.
Move over to the side.
Yeah, come on over.
Yeah,
That better?
the sun was just our excuse,
Bring your microphone with you.
Cozy over. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Continue.
No problem. So there were, two main areas, both along, the bigger setback from the property line to the north, and then in the northeast corner of the building where we removed the kink of the building to preserve more of the mature plantings there, while also closest to the building, preserving how the stormwater management works and access along the building that would have been required for fire department, pulling hoses, things like that, access along the building. So I think the principle is preserve as much as we could, and then where we couldn't preserve them, to enhance that with more plantings. We also integrated into the design that I think had been we had agreed to do previously, but hadn't been in the design, the privacy fencing along the residential property lines versus the open chain link we had before. Of course, there's a new sunken courtyard that we created that needed some landscape design, and a reconfiguration of the other courtyards, which had changed in size and configuration, which moved a retaining wall back on the west side of the courtyard and had to redesign playground area there, some of the usable areas there. Also going on in the background, we did update I think I mentioned before, the site plans by a civil engineer to make sure all the stormwater management was still compliant with what he had previously designed, and that the grading and retaining walls would all work with how we were redoing the landscaping features. They also provided an updated photometric plan, although I think that's essentially in the same place it was before, except there's some spillover at the edge of the Avalon Bay property.
Because I was going to say, actually, when I saw that photometric plan, I didn't see the spillover in the,
Yeah.
the diagram there, but maybe
It looked like
I
they
have
got
a very
the- I thought-
untrained eye, so
okay.
maybe I don't understand what I'm looking at.
I think-
Up like 1,000 to
I think
be
our
sure.
intent was to try to preserve that waiver in case the design there, but I don't know if that got into if that was addressed there.
I don't care about this.
We communicated with Avalon Bay. It's obviously parking lot to parking lot. There's a little buffer between them, so some of the spillover was
No, I think we
was
saw
minimal.
the waiver. I think just on the photometric plan, it
Yeah.
looked like zeros all the way around.
Right,
to me,
that's what
Okay.
I saw.
but-
Oh, okay,
I
did
just-
it not?
So I looked at that and I was like, do we actually need the waiver here?
Yeah.
But again, like, I actually don't know what I'm looking
Yeah.
at, so like, that's, I could be totally
Yeah, the
wrong.
property line's like right, almost up to the parking there, so I wasn't quite sure. So I assume we were would like to
Terry,
preserve
we're
the waiver
talking about
just
the
in
bottom
case.
edge of that.
Yeah, it's all the way
slide.
to the right, where the property line jump. So if you can scooch
Oh,
the
it's-
drawing to the left, we can see to the right.
It's color coded on this sheet that was sent around. It's so much harder to read on this. I don't
Yeah.
even know if this will be helpful.
Oh, it is color coded on here, it's just,
Yeah.
the screen we were looking
Oh.
at there is bad color.
So
But,
the-
yeah, what
so-
I see is zero.
yeah, but actually the Avalon Bay property line is north of those parking spaces. It's in that, so that there's a swale that runs between, or actually a landscape buffer area where some of the spillover is happening, even though it doesn't really spill all the way onto it's
Understood.
over their property line.
Okay.
It's over their property.
I don't care about the lighting in that area.
Yeah, I think
But
that's why.
what,
it's-
this is a little bit fun, I'm not really too sure of this, but I know lighting, you get it in different different colors. I see that more often when I'm, talking about lighting on the interior lighting, you will want it set at different levels of shades of bright white. So is the exterior lighting, does that have that option, and does that affect the photometric, or, can we still go with maybe a not so harsh of a white light and still meet the lighting levels that you need?
I'm not exactly sure to answer that in a technical way. Is Michael online, and do you think you can answer that, Michael?
Well, I'm no lighting expert. Yes, you can adjust it, so that wouldn't be quite as bright. Yes, so that is doable.
Yeah, well, it's not just the brightness, right? It's the color temperature. Right. I think there's a lot of stuff about how blue the light is and its effect on folks, especially, community members when they're trying to sleep and things like that, that having yellower light can be better. But, if there's specific safety reasons that can't happen, that would be understandable. But I agree with Mr. Kill, that would be at least worth considering as an option.
I was also curious on this photometric plan. It seems like a lot of the light spillage stops at the vegetated borders between that and the Walker Street and the rear. Is that based on existing vegetation that won't be removed? Is that based on intended landscape? Is that just because of the distance that the light travels? It just seemed like the zeros were mostly right after the tree line.
So our lighting engineer was able to use some of the existing trees to help inform that, but for the most part, it does have to do with distance there. Because no matter how much he looks into it, you can't get a perfectly accurate one to play it safe.
Okay. So if there are existing trees that play into this, is there communication between the various stages of planning that those trees are somewhat important to the plan in one section versus another? Like, does landscaping know which trees were considered in the photometric plans?
Yes, we'd be able to figure that out by talking to our lighting engineer.
A somewhat related question is, I guess, trees don't live forever. If some of those trees aren't there anymore, does that then affect the compliance of the lighting with the plot, or is everything designed so that even if all the trees were to be gone someday, that it wouldn't necessarily impact the light bleeding?
Yeah, precisely.
Okay, the latter. Okay.
Okay. So maybe Terry, can you bring up the landscape plan itself so we can refer to that, and then maybe Mike, we can take them a little bit through. I think that's our site plan. There should be a separate landscape.
I think it's in one of the.
Oh, it's at the end of the civil. Okay, no, it's. Nope, there you go.
There
Yep,
you go.
there.
Michael, can you help us understand this landscape plan a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi, I'm Michael Jokum. I appreciate the virtual, letting me join virtually. Appreciate it. So I'm just going to walk you through some of the updates to our landscape plan, which come as a result of comments from the town, the abutters, and the peer reviewers. So this first slide is our overall landscape plan. It gives you a good idea of the site, some of the changes we made, some of the setbacks, the new placement of the courtyard spaces, and our overall planting approach, with emphasis on those buffers between the abutters. So I'm sure you've all seen the plan before, so I'll run you through a list of some of our updates from last time. We updated the plan to preserve a bunch more existing trees along the 39 Prescott Street abutter. This is going to reduce the visual impact of the project and the auditory impact. And we're also supplementing those existing trees with buffer evergreen trees and other deciduous trees, which are going to help create a layered feel and just really minimize any disturbance between the two properties. We also made, as mentioned before, we added 6-foot wood privacy fences between the project and any abutting residential properties. That mixed with the planting buffer is really going to do a good job to help privatize the development. We're also, with this new update, we're able to preserve, I believe, 6 more existing trees up against 39 Prescott Street, which the way the trees are lined up, it creates almost a hedge between the two properties, which was something we worked to do with the building setbacks. We also updated the central courtyard space. As mentioned, it's a sunken courtyard with retaining walls, so it's going to be lower than the 39 Prescott Street side. And the courtyard being there with even the massing less there, it's going to be a better feel for those abutters. And it's really going to help scale down the development. We also did some updates to the entry sequence. You can see the tree-lined driveway entrance, and the driveway is now centered on the garage. And we're still proposing to keep the existing vegetated swale with native plantings.
So help me understand a little bit, if I apologize for jumping in, but you know, when we looked at the renderings earlier that the architect had put forward based on the existing trees, they had placed some large existing trees between the northwest corner of the building and the building across the street in Prescott. And I'm looking at the plan here, and I don't see those trees in that plan. Is it that the trees are part of the easement? There's something other green that is sort of in that top corner there, but help me understand a little bit about like what's there between the building and the next house.
So they're between the building and the next house. We have, if you look at the mint colored trees, they're the more plain circles, those are the existing trees. And you can see the darker trees, the evergreen hedge along that property line. Yeah. And so actually this one may not be the most up to date, as we're now, that shows I think 4 existing trees to remain. We're now proposing 10, which go like all the way around that abutter at 39 Prescott.
So that would be helpful then to have that updated plan that covers that. Okay. Because yeah, otherwise I was trying to understand the discrepancy between the rendering as presented and what's here.
My apologies, yeah.
No, it's okay. All right, keep going, I'm sorry.
I think that was most of our updates on the landscape front. Pass it back to the team or open up to any questions or comments from y'all.
Well, I guess I would wonder, so I appreciate, and I would like the chair to have an updated landscape plan that actually shows the existing trees that are currently slated for preservation. Do you have a plan in the works for a tree preservation plan, or is it just that they're outside of the literal footprint of the building and therefore it's assumed that they'll be able to be saved? Because the last thing I think all of us would want is for this to go through and then immediately have those existing trees die and become hazards on the property line because they weren't protected. So I'm wondering if the identification of trees that can be saved is based on an actual plan for preservation, or is it based on just whatever is outside of the footprint of the foundation, proposed foundation?
So that comes from visiting the site, measuring some of the trees, and we do have a existing tree plan in the works. So those trees are accurately placed. They were on the survey, and we measured them, looked at their health, and then worked with the architects to step back the building so that the building itself was not within the critical root zone of those trees. Of course, perhaps an arborist may have to assess further, but that was the intent there.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's possible to ask for more information about what the process is in terms of identifying those, because, I mean, just having the foundation itself not be within the critical root zone doesn't mean there's not damage to the critical root zone during construction. So, if there's any more information to be had about how you're planning to preserve and which existing trees, that would be extremely helpful.
Understood.
And I know we're being very
With that-
particular here, but I think it is important, because I think the way that you present the rendering of having those large trees between the building and the neighbors, I think is actually a worthwhile feature, and I think as valuable as a lot of the other things of step backs and things like that you have done. But we need to, if that is going to be a thing that we assume is there, we need to have pretty firm confidence that it will survive and that it will be a feature, right? It would be a real shame if that went, just because, as you said, like, we built the foundation was just a little too close and it didn't manage to survive.
Yeah, or construction materials were stored at the base, or, moving equipment was moved under the tree. There's lots of things that can happen, and there are arboricultural forums to create tree preservation plans. I just wasn't sure if the selection of these trees in particular was based on that process, or just a site plan of where the foundation is going to go, and not, because I know we're not very deep into the construction details plans yet. So
Yeah,
I think,
I was going to suggest that I think as part of the construction management plan, I think that would make sense. Since they've identified the trees that they think should be able to be preserved, if we could incorporate in our construction management plan how the contractors are going to,
Right.
plan to do that.
And Right. how
That
they
might be the
can
most
be-
appropriate, because it's, at that point, it'll be a well-developed construction plan to say where are they laying down, where do they need to dig to get the foundations in.
right.
I think we just want a commitment, not so much of the how, but the if. Right.
Yeah, well, and the which trees and where they would be. I think I think you're right that the renderings illustrate trees that generously it would take 20 years for newly planted trees to get to that point, that size. It would probably be more like 50 years before you could get existing tree cover that is similar to what is now. So,
I will say
Yeah.
the architectural renderings, I think, correspond to this earlier version of the 4 trees that are on this plan, as far as what their rendering's showing, more toward the corner, and where Verdant has added additional trees as they've worked their way back along the 39 Prescott, identifying
Yep.
as the rest of the footprint was moving back. We have another plan that I have from them. Sorry that this was failed to be submitted, but that's all stepping back. That wasn't relevant to the renderings that they were showing. Those are on this plan.
okay, so that's interesting, because I know from the view from Upland, there was a tree that was larger than the other ones in that area. Maybe, sorry, Terry, can we go back to the renderings part?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
No, I think it's a little bit further
Okay, I was gonna say,
from Upland is, yeah.
Yeah, I could cover that one if it's proper.
Is that-
yeah,
is that
so the
tree-
tree that you're seeing, so the larger trees are to the left of the proposed building, and they're shown transparent here.
Yeah, what's that tree that's right in
The
front of
tree
the
that's
elevation?
right in front of the car is actually an existing tree on the corner of, not on our property, it's across the street
Ah.
on the corner of
I
Upland and
see,
Prescott.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's actually at 24
okay.
Prescott?
That's right, yeah.
that's my
Gotcha.
misunderstanding. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So is there any mature tree cover between 24 Prescott, like the front of 24 Prescott and this elevation?
No.
Okay.
So the trees that you did put between 24 Prescott and yourself, how much will those grow? I guess the reason I'm asking this is right now there's a project that I'm involved in that I did 20 years ago when we planted trees, and yesterday we cut them all down because they had all grown too big into the building. And we're replacing them with smaller ones, but, the fact that they grow, are they gonna grow too big. You know, we would want them to grow big to screen it out a little bit more, but is that actually going to end up being a problem? And you'll have to, you know, take them down, and they won't be serving any purpose at that point.
Yeah, so all of these, all the trees we're planting, we're showing them at not quite mature size, but a little bit bigger than when we were to plant them, just to give us an idea of how they grow in, but also so that they don't, like you said, grow too big and cause a nuisance in the end. So all those trees should work just fine how we have them.
So you have evergreen hedges along that elevation facing 24. And in the planting list, you have white pine and 2 different types of arborvitae. Do you know which of those 3 evergreen options that screen is? If it's
That
labeled
screen
here,
is
it's too
likely-
small to see. Sorry.
That we haven't gotten quite into laying out exactly what type of shrub. We more just wanted to get a list of shrubs that we knew would work into place, but that, based on the size there, would be a mix of arborvitaes and probably eastern red cedars, as they don't grow too big where they'd affect the building or become too big of a burden, but where we can plant them at a size where they can start, you know, doing some screening on day one.
So, I mean, eastern red cedars or arborvitae, do you know which arborvitae? Because green giants get to be like 45 feet tall, emerald greens get to be like 12. So it's kind of a big difference.
Yes, we'd be able to substitute them, and I guess we just haven't looked too far into exactly what those species are at the moment. But we'd happy to put anything in there that would do the job as necessary.
Okay, one more thing about the trees from me. I wasn't going to say anything about trees because we have you here, Laura. But the same project I was just talking about, one of the reasons, in addition to the trees growing into the building and being too big, they also lifted the sidewalk and the curb. So will these trees going along Prescott Street damage that sidewalk there in the future from the root growth? Or I know there are methods to, you know, with aeration loops and water, you know, subsurface watering and like that to sort of minimize the trees, the roots from growing so close to the surface and damaging.
Wasn't there a retaining wall going between the trees and the sidewalk? Or am I misplacing the retaining wall?
No, there is between, right, the part of the building directly across from 24 Prescott. There's a retaining wall, and the trees are planted lower
Okay,
inside that
the
wall.
retaining wall.
Yep.
Yeah.
how about down in front of, what is it, 14 Prescott?
There is a retaining wall there, directly across from 14 Prescott that sort of dies into where the
So the
where the
roots are gonna
egress
be-
comes out.
The roots would be deeper there. so
The roots should be deeper.
On this drawing, the light blue, is that the step back? Is that signifying the step back?
No, I think that's signifying where it's the ground. It's only 4 stories where the light blue is, and there's 5 stories where the darker blue is. It's the way it's built into the hill. And I was, you know, I think we're open to suggestions about, you know, species or particular plantings that, you know, especially if we have some expertise on the board and there's some input there that you'd like to give our team. We're certainly receptive to that.
Oh, I mean, my design consultation fee is pretty high. I mean, I think it is unfortunate that there's no mature trees that can be preserved along Prescott. I mean, it is, like, no matter what you plant, it's going to look very small in comparison to a 4 or 5 story building for a very long time, especially with it being below the level of the street. You know, I mean, certain trees that you plant you won't even see from the street or from 24 probably with the retaining wall there. So I'm just sort of trying to incorporate that, because I think the renderings made it seem like there was a mature tree there that was being saved, and yeah. I'll process that as we go.
All right, any other thoughts or questions?
Well, I don't know if this is the right time.
It's always the right time.
Okay, so, I'm just wondering, it seems like you have sufficient parking, and throughout the site, you've got other shared spaces, so there seems to be plenty of parking. I don't know if you could, sacrifice that front row of parking against the building and shift everything down that much to pull it away from the street.
Well, you're saying on the surface parking,
Yeah, that row, that's right against the building.
to do more green planting up from the
No,
view
no,
toward the building?
well, if you take that out, you can move the whole building south by 20 feet or so. That would pull it away from Prescott a bit.
Yeah,
Then you could do more planting, but I'm also just thinking moving the building
but,
further
yeah,
from Prescott.
but what's not shown on here, though, that I think is shown on all the site plans, all the easements that run through those parking lots now.
Utilities?
Utilities and I think there's a water line, a sewer line, power easements that go through there, so that area is not an area we could put building foundations in. We can, keep the surface parking that's there. So that was one of the lines that we sort of drew in our, early on in the design processing. We have to stay back from that particular line of this parking lot.
Does that include, there is some greenscaping between the parking lot and the building? Is that on an easement?
Yes, we can do some plantings as there is parking and other plantings in the easements. We have some rights to do plantings in those.
No, absolutely. I just
Yep.
wasn't sure, because it's not, like you said, it's not shown on here. Do we have a site plan that shows the easements that we can pull up?
I think, Terry, if you can go back up. I'm not sure if he has on this set a survey. Oh, I think you can sort of see it
Yeah, I
on
think it
this.
was- oh, sorry,
That
no,
one
Pat,
up,
it was
yeah.
just
If you
overlaid.
zoom in on the surface parking areas there, you can start to see.
It doesn't look like there's.
If you pull the plan up a little bit more, Terry.
You go back over to the other side.
So there's a water easement that's running through those upper spaces. There's some overlap of these easements too that's not entirely clear. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that, this is definitely not my area of expertise, but that line of the water easement, is that the edge of the water easement, or is there a buffer past that?
I think that's the edge.
So
You can
that,
see the building goes right down to
Yeah.
that line.
oh, I see, it's not just in the parking area.
Is that a public water line, town line, or is
That's
that?
that's the town water line.
All right.
I mean, if you changed how the front wing attaches to that westernmost section, would that be able to move that rear wing down a little bit, or does that, if this were, sorry, Terry, can you not move the bed? This were down here and the hallway went into the center here instead of down, would that enable that to shift, or is that also too close to the water easement?
Well, no, we have the face of our building goes, as you can see, in a couple of spots close to the water easement. The rest has to do with, the overall design of the building, trying to find good locations for other green spaces. We think that we've been observing pretty well the setbacks from the street and the neighbors, so that we wouldn't want to keep pushing and pulling on the edges of the building where we are observing what we think are appropriate setbacks there. And we do like having a little bit of planting on the front. In fact, we did a little tweak that I don't think Burton pointed out in this plan. We set the garage back a few extra feet from the surface parking, actually, to get in a little bit of area that we can take advantage of with some green plantings in front of the garage as it faces that parking area. There is a long facade you're looking at from the mill side and from the public way on High Street that those step backs accomplish an opportunity to buffer that and break up that facade.
Anything further? Sukila, you look like you're deciding whether or not to say something.
Well, I'm thinking if you can't move the building forward and you sacrifice those parking spaces, could you sacrifice some of them in the garage to make the garage a little smaller?
Well, I will point out, we did take off half a level of the garage in the prior round. So the section closest to the neighbors was actually taken off the top of the garage to make it work. As you enter in, actually the 5-story part of building 2 there to the east, that floor level comes out at grade into the parking lot. So there's a connection between the parking lot where we're trying to get into the building there, while still stepping the parking back from the neighborhood. So I think that we agree that there's, probably more than enough parking in these plans, but we're also trying to make sure there's more than enough parking on the plan so we can, use it across the uses and keep our residents parking in the garage as much as possible.
Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you again. Just again, for the record, Daniel Lasivita with Finance and Associates. I did just want to add, relative to the shrinking of the garage, we do need to maintain a reasonable level of slope as you go up. So I believe the intent of your question was, can it be pulled back or be pulled closer to the surface parking? Excuse me, first time I've talked in a while. Pull it closer to the surface parking within the site. That's not.
That wasn't what I was thinking, but that's a good idea.
That wasn't. Well, unfortunately, I was coming up to say that's something that can't really be done just due to the grades that need to be kept within the garage, right? You need a certain length of the garage to be able to keep it compliant.
I think Mr. Killer was asking about the other dimension, right? The width of it. Can it be brought in?
Sure, I would say.
I was really just thinking, is there any opportunity to make it
Okay.
smaller from the Prescott Street side? But go ahead, sorry.
I was just going to say, essentially the same point remains as well, because you got to go up the length of the garage and then have enough width to be able to make a full turn, then straighten out, then make another turn to go up to the next level as well. So in theory, the same thing applies.
Yeah, I think it's important to point out, since the garage doesn't have a roof, it's really like a full floor down from how the buildings are. The buildings essentially wrap the garage, so I think it will be, one of the reasons we stepped down the left side of the garage is we pulled the building away, and we can buffer, we have some more landscape buffer to help ease that, but it's really receding from the neighborhood there. And I think the architectural team's done a good job of trying to actually minimize the impact of the garage as we've shifted it away from the neighborhood, stepped it down in that area while preserving its functionality.
Okay.
Ms. Rutherford, do you have anything before we move on from landscape?
Not at this time, no.
All right. All right, thank you. So I think okay, we do have a little bit more on parking to discuss.
Yeah, I think we'll actually Mr. Killelea brought up that something we were bringing up as well in the parking, that what in our previous proposals, we had fully compliant parking counts for the number of units and bedrooms and the underlying zoning that would be appropriate for any apartment project of this size. In an effort to shrink the garage and minimize its impact, we've gone a little bit under what that requirement would be. So we wanted to point that out, and that we think it's a good choice. We're willing to sacrifice parking. We think we have more than enough parking. There are obviously waivers we've asked for related to be able to use it for shared parking, as we've used across the site and as we had parking studies demonstrate. But according to the underlying zoning now, what's on site is a little bit under the requirement. What we also didn't count is any of the street parking in the neighborhood that's allowed in the sub-district A parking counts, that there'd certainly be more than enough if we were counting public way parking that we'd normally count under the zoning for a project on this location. So just wanted to point that out as we are asking for parking relief.
And I actually did not have time to go and dig through the parking studies again, but when I was looking at the sort of redesign plans, it looks like parking area I is kind of getting turned into the throughway, like this sort of subdivision driveway. That's like kind of like the surface parking just below the parking right in front of the proposed building. Is that parking going to remain, or does that get turned into a throughway, basically?
No, that parking remains. When we did the subdivision plan originally, that surface parking area was turned into the subdivision road. So this lot is north of that subdivision road. We're not changing that subdivision road. That subdivision road has shared parking on it already under the prior special permits and subdivision plan that was approved. So we're not intending on changing anything about that road. Its parking counts. Just there's certain points where we intersect with the subdivision road at a couple points. So there's some minor changes there.
Okay, so I think it was just a stylistic thing on the drawing that made it seem like that parking might be
Yeah, we
disappearing.
refer to it for the parking counts in the parking study. They refer to it as a lot. It's really a subdivision road that has parking on it that supports the campus.
Any remaining thoughts or questions?
Not about parking, I don't think.
All right. So before we move on to waivers, because I think that's kind of will be the next thing after this. I want to first discuss the interaction with Avalon. So there was a request by the community to look into the agreement that was for the Avalon project. And that agreement, as part of that agreement, there was discussion about the overall layout of the property, what would go where, those kind of things. And the question was asked is, are there commitments in there that would either preclude this development or, I think more likely, require additional waivers for this development? And so I asked Ms. Murray to take a look into this, and she has provided a report. But and rather than try to clumsily summarize it when we have Ms. Murray here, I think if it's okay, I would love to pass it on to you to discuss a little bit.
So for the record, Carolyn Murray from KP Law. I want to just correct one thing, if I may respectfully, Mr. Chair.
Oh, please do, please.
We don't have an agreement. That was
Okay.
sort of what was the genesis behind the
Okay.
question was there some sort of agreement or commitment that was made? What we do have is a series of special permits, master plans, modifications, all of that. And essentially, the project came down to 3 phases. This now becomes phase 3. But the special permit in question was the April 4th, 2023 special permit. And in particular, it was finding number 6 that talked about phase 3, which said that, under prior zoning, under the Planned Development District Master Plan, there were 140 new units that were proposed to be built as part of what was the East Mill Flats, plus what has been called Lot 3 here, also sometimes referred to as the parking garage parcel in the various planning board special permits. And in the April 2023 special permit, finding number 6, the decision states that the remaining 89 units are proposed for parcel 3, also known as the parking garage parcel. And the question was, this is now lot 3, the parking garage parcel, where we have a 40B before us. Far more than 89 units are proposed. So is the developer somehow or other bound by those 89 units? And respectfully, there was no approval of 89 units for Lot 3. The decision of the planning board that references the remaining 89 units proposed for this parcel goes on to state there are no current plans for this development. And then when we go on to finding 10 of that same decision, the planning board notes that Lot 3 is proposed as remaining for parking use at this time. Any proposed changes that would add new uses or structures would require approval by the planning board as an amendment to the Subdistrict A Master Plan Special Permit. So reading those two things together, there may have been representations made, there may have been plans and visions for how this whole mill complex was to be redeveloped, but there was never a planning board decision approving a certain number of residential units on this specific lot. So the question in terms of was there an agreement or was there a commitment? No, there was not. So in terms of enforcement, there being no prior permit for those 89 units, there's nothing for the town to enforce. But even if there was a prior special permit for this development or for the parking garage parcel itself, that doesn't preclude a developer from coming in and saying, we're going to scrap that prior proposal. We now want to come in with a 40B. Or they could have come back and said, I know we originally proposed 89 residential units for this site. We're now going to come in perhaps with a modification or a new special permit for something different. Could be different uses, different number of units, whatever it might be. And I will say this site has had a lot of modifications to it over the years. So that was always a potential. But there's nothing that committed them to 89 units here. Even if there had been, they could still come in with a 40B and say, this is our new plan. So no, the answer to the question is they're not bound to any sort of prior commitment for 89 units.
And you know, my understanding of the 40B process in general, right, is that it exists specifically to override local zoning and local requirements. And so insofar as we could create anything on a particular plot of land, the entire rule set is to say that those do not necessarily apply.
Correct.
And then the other part is that you mentioned in there that, you know, there was that line, well, if they want to do any further modifications, they would come back to the planning board. And my understanding, again, as an amateur here, is that 40B is structured in such a way that, effectively speaking, the zoning board here is the planning board, right?
Absolutely.
It is to make it so that they don't have to hop between boards, that everything will be done here. So it's not a matter of they have to go back to the planning board, get approval, and then come to us. We are the planning board.
You
for
are
this.
in the unenviable position of acting in place of all local boards under a 40B, including the planning board.
Is there any thoughts or questions? I know this is like a kind of technical matter.
The
But,
parking, or the agreements.
The
for sure.
Avalon interaction stuff. This is,
You know, I mean, I believe the experts when they say that there's no explicit conflict saying that they can't do any adjustments or changes.
All right, thank you. That was a very helpful summary. At least it was for me. I feel like I have a better understanding of that now. So thank you. All right. So I do want to talk about waivers. You folks, Mr. Steinberg, you and Mr. Smolak, you gave us a list of waivers. Mr. Smolak, yes, please come on up. A list of waivers. And again, this is, you know, another area where I confess I am not an expert.
I would love for you to walk us through it. And then the other thing is I did also ask Ms. Murray to take a look at these, specifically with regards to their specificity, right? Because one of the things that we talked about earlier on in this process is that I think the initial list of waivers, very understandably, especially because the project was liable to change, you gave us a fairly general overlay of waivers. And this list is meant to be a bit more specific. And certainly when we vote, I would like that list to be as narrow as reasonable. All right, so yes, please walk us through a little bit. And I apologize if it looks like I'm looking at my phone, it's because I neglected to print out the waiver list, so I have it here on my phone. And so it's not that I'm ignoring you, it's I'm trying to read along.
Sorry, Terry, do we have another copy
You guys are
of
being very kind.
the list of
I'll share it
waivers?
here with Mr. Killenly. I want you to be able to look at it too. So.
Good evening. For the record, John Smolak, attorney for the applicant. Just before I get started, just a little bit of history, just to follow up on your prior comments. When David and actually RCG started to get involved with this site and actually purchased the property in 2007, RCG was very open about the process in terms of master planning the property. And the reason why there are so many different amendments and modifications is because, consistent with what RCG and David and Alex had said all along, is that we're going to follow the market wherever the market goes for commercial and residential. And over those years, markets changed. So in some years, commercial was a strong driver. Some years, residential is a strong driver, and that's how this project evolved. And what folks may not realize is that in 2007, East Mill was probably about 90 or so % vacant. And I think our firm is one of the first new tenants when David purchased the property, and all the buildings in East Mill were almost completely open, and so over the years, RCG took the risk and eventually rebuilt and redeveloped the property in phases. Then the opportunity came up with West Mill to redevelop that property as well. It resulted in a rezoning with the Subdistrict A to provide the flexibility and so on. And in terms of the parking garage, that was always meant to be one of the pieces of the puzzle, but the number of units was just a shot in the dark way back when, because it was part of a master plan effort to come up with an idea. It wasn't really a hard and fast number. So that's how it evolved. Again, RCG took the risk, and I think at least I am as a resident really thankful that East and West Mill came to be, because of the fact that it really reinvigorated the downtown, actually resulted in sort of a reinvigoration of Main Street as well. And although people don't want to hear it, it really has become the Main Street, and has actually resulted in redevelopment of the Main Street corridor as well. So, but with that said, that's what's happened all along. It's been an open process in terms of an evolving master plan in terms of redevelopment. So, but with that said, in terms of the waivers that we've put together, I guess there are 3 separate types of waivers that we have in the list, and I break them down as either administrative, substantive, or illustrative. And what I mean by that is, in terms of administrative, there are provisions in the bylaw that provide, for example, that the building inspector can only issue a building permit if a project is in compliance with the zoning bylaws. And of course, if there are waivers granted, a building inspector can't issue a building permit in accordance with the bylaws, and it's as modified by any waivers that the board might grant. And when I say substantive, what I mean by that is, an obvious waiver might be a waiver from a setback requirement. And then lastly, illustrative, what I mean by that, and town council has already mentioned that previously, and it's on the note 1 on my cover page, is that basically under 40B, zoning waivers are required solely from as-of-right requirements, and there should be no requirement to obtain waivers from the special permit requirements for the district. And so what you'll see in here And this list of waivers are examples of special permits that would ordinarily be required. For example, the Downtown Overlay District, Subdistrict A, is a special permit requirement in this circumstance. And so we've included it as an illustration, but it is sort of the most closely analogous type of zoning process that we would have undertaken had we gone the conventional route. But I think that this project does substantially fit within that district in terms of requirements. And in terms of 40B, every 40B has waivers from the zoning requirements, because that's the nature of 40B. It's designed to get away from exclusionary zoning practices to create affordable housing. And so that's why we have 40B, and it's been the most effective tool in Massachusetts since 1969. So when it was created. So to keep a long story short, I'll go through the waivers briefly, but and anyone can stop me, town council, if they have any questions or comments. But the first set of waivers are really related to general bylaws, and the first of which is related to sewers. It's simply a connection permit. And basically what this, and as was mentioned previously by town council, basically the Board of Appeals is stepping into the shoes of the various municipal officials to issue permits. And so that's what this waiver allows the board to do, subject to our compliance with the customary requirements of the DPW's Water and Sewer Division. So that's the waiver we're requesting in that, with that regard.
Yes, please.
Sorry, if I could ask just for a clarification. That provision of the bylaw also sets a sewer service connection fee, but I don't see that you're requesting a waiver from the fee. Is that correct?
Unless the board wants to grant us a fee
I just
waiver.
want to be clear, since it's in there, that we're not glossing over anything.
We would prefer not to.
It did look like it had initially been in there, but it is
Right.
crossed out. Am I right that anything that's crossed out is no longer being requested? Right,
So
yes.
there's two versions that Mr. Smollett provided us. One is a red-lined version
Right.
that was the previous version with all the stuff crossed out. And then the other version is the one that Terry had up until this point, which is just with the relevant text. Terry, I think we'd like to stick with the one that's the final one, just because it'll be easier to read.
Cleaner, but yeah, just
Okay.
to,
But for for
Clarify.
our understanding's sake, yeah.
right.
Sure. Yeah, that's the intent. And so the next waiver is just dealing with stormwater management. As you recall, Horsley Witten had identified 4 items that were requested in terms of waivers from the stormwater bylaw. Again, the board would be issuing, the proposal is for the board to issue the stormwater permit subject to the stormwater standards. And there are 4 waivers that were identified under the stormwater bylaw that are listed, and we're requesting a waiver from those 4 specific requirements, which Horsley Witten didn't appear to object to. I could list them if you'd like, or
I don't think we need to go into extensive detail here. I think after we go through this, I will want to talk with, have Ms. Murray talk with us about where we can make these narrower if possible. I think that would be my one thing, but that I think is sort of a general theme, and I don't think we can edit this line by line in a timely manner in this meeting,
That's
but
fine.
more just to set that up as an expectation, and then we can talk about
Sure.
a timeline so that it's all ready for our next meeting and can be distributed to the members.
Okay. And the next several waivers, one is dealing with street excavation permit, and the next is a driveway permit. Again, having the board be in the position to issue those permits subject to the requirements of the DPW and state law for those items, to the extent those are needed to be issued. The next is underground utilities and installation of new poles or overhead wires. There's a local bylaw that has a restriction on installing overhead wires and poles. And however, some public utilities we have no control over in terms of these items. So what we're requesting is a limited waiver to allow for the installation of those poles and overhead wires to the extent that's required by a public utility.
Is there any way to know what will be required by the public utility there?
Probably not until you get to the point where you're requesting service,
Okay.
I would think. I
Well,
mean, you,
So it also, what they will allow depends on what you're willing to pay, okay? Because for a fee, you can put a lot of things underground. So does a waiver mean, well, you say they won't allow it because we don't want to pay the, $100,000 fee? Or does it mean they won't allow it even if you pay a fee?
well, it's a conversation that we had with Grid. I know that David had a lot of discussions on the West Mills side dealing with National Grid, and it was a difficult situation.
Well, I will note that, a whole new service was run down Prescott Street to serve both the West Mill and the Avalon Bay West Mill project at that time, and then turned back in underground to get to the Avalon Bay second. So we have poles in service right up to the edge of our property already coming in underground. That should be sufficient. The utilities, they can be a little unpredictable when it comes down to that very moment. But my suspicion here is we're not impacting any public way for sure. It would just be routes to come in the building with the service, and the high transmission lines that come through the property now are not going to be used for this property. They won't let us use them for residential. So it'll come off the same lines that come into
So I forget, so do you have the services planned to be underground now?
yes,
So-
it's coming in from where the power lines that come down. I think it's the 13 kVA is the voltage they call it. They come down from the residential neighborhood into the site, then come in underground to our site, and then would split off into our utility room. But as John said, we don't know if they say, hey, we don't want to run in this way. There could be reasons that are beyond our control that would say, actually, we want you to put in a pole in this part in your parking lot. We'd have to figure that out.
I guess I just don't want it to be because you want to save 20 grand.
Well, I think to the extent
If they-
it's not in the design now, wouldn't we have to come back and ask for?
Well, this is a waiver. We're granting you a waiver that says,
You can build whatever you want.
well,
Well, it's required by
unless the-
National Grid, yeah.
yeah.
So,
So National Grid might require you to put in a pole because
Or they may
it's cheaper.
Or they might require us to wait a year or so.
Well, but
Yeah, so,
Ms. Murray, do you have any input on this? Do you have any experience writing a waiver specific to this?
I just don't want us to end up with the worst product because there's a fee and you don't want to pay the fee and you say,
yeah, I hear you.
If the concern is, if what I'm hearing is the concern that it's one thing if the utility says, we will only do this above ground for whatever reasons, maybe there's ledge or other conflicting things underground. It sounds like that might be something the board's inclined to grant. But if I'm hearing you correctly, Mr. Killalea, it's, you don't want this to be a cost-saving mechanism where everything goes above ground just because the applicant doesn't want to spend the money to put it underground.
right.
So I think I can try to work on something.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. But the existing poles stay.
Yeah, the existing
Yeah.
poles that come, there's existing poles that come down Prescott Street that would stay. Those are on public
The ones
lands.
that go across the
I was gonna say,
easement.
those are staying. They're unrelated to this project.
Right, okay, just make
So
that.
it really doesn't,
So, I mean,
whether it's underground or above ground, it really doesn't
There
clean
will
up
be
all the
wires.
wires,
Yeah.
right, so.
but at least it's some.
Yeah, okay.
No.
But I think we now sort of know where we're going with this, so, okay, let's keep going.
And the next item was stricken, which was accessible parking. The general bylaw is inconsistent with the state law, so at least with respect to lower parking counts, but it's not an issue with our project at this point, so we're withdrawing that waiver request. Next is permitted uses. There's just a general permitted use provision that states that certain uses are allowed in specific zoning districts, all other uses are prohibited, so we're,
This is a residential unit going in an industrial zoned area, so
and
that's what you're
in
asking.
an R
anyway.
zone and
Right.
multifamily in a R4 zone as well, right,
Yeah.
so. And next is just a list of permit,
Sorry, just really quick before we leave that one. In the verbiage as provided in the comprehensive permit, so that means like if there was a substantial change to the design, we would have to revisit, right?
In other words, if you wanted to turn it into a swimming pool, right, you couldn't just do that without coming
have to
back
come
to
back.
us.
If there were changes to something that would affect the comprehensive permit, it would be, okay. Just wanted to clarify that.
And if I may, to that point, Mr. Chair, typically when I write the conditions or any, your maybe specific conditions to the waivers or otherwise, we'll always reference as shown on the approved plans. So if there's no swimming pool shown on the approved plans, we're not going to turn what's a driveway into a swimming pool, for example.
Right.
I like pools.
I mean, I think the neighbors would not object if this was a swimming pool instead of a residential set building, but that's a whole nother story.
Story had swimming pool, maybe.
All right, let's continue.
The next item is just the list, itemized list of uses, permitted uses on the property, which is in the right-hand column, because R4 and the IS don't allow those types of uses, and the Subdistrict A doesn't allow those uses without a special permit. So that's what that one means. The next item is earth removal. I think, you know, if the board approves this project, there is an exemption from earth removal for if the board issues a comprehensive permit. So if the board issues a comprehensive permit, we could withdraw this waiver request for earth removal.
So help me understand what that means. I apologize. So what do you mean by if we?
There is an earth, well, the earth removal bylaw has varying levels of permits. I
Sure.
mean, it was really designed to deal with sand and gravel operations.
Okay.
Then it has, and then it has provisions dealing with earth removal incidental to certain construction activities. And in this case, there's a list of waivers under the earth removal bylaw, one of which is if there's an order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission, then you're exempt from this bylaw. Another one is if there's a comprehensive permit issued.
Okay. But isn't that what we are, like, what is our version of this where we are not granting a comprehensive permit, I guess is what I'm understanding. Like,
Or a comprehensive permit approving the project,
right, but like,
in which case then we wouldn't
Right.
need this
You-
waiver. We would be exempt.
Right, because if you approve the comprehensive permit, then you're allowing these buildings, the parking garage, the driveway, everything, and that would be covered by the waiver.
So what good is it to have the
Incidental.
waiver if you don't approve it?
Well,
If we don't approve the project, I guess.
right, I'm trying to understand, right, like,
See you at the HAC.
I guess, is there any world in which we don't eliminate this?
well, one question I did have, if I may, Mr. Chair, you were asking, I think, Ms. Barrett and myself to go through and make some notes or question specificity. One of the things that section 5-7 addresses are hours of operation for the earth removal and days of the week when that can occur. And that becomes very important to neighbors. So I don't want us to just say, oh, we don't need that waiver entirely. I think we might want to at least address that.
Yeah, and I think that sounds more like a condition than a waiver, right?
Could be.
But that we can probably shape that into the conditions.
Yeah, I mean, the draft decision does include hours of operation and so on, and that could be included as part of the CM construction management plan.
Right.
I assume would be conditioned.
And I
So-
appreciate that it is worth having us talk about this
Mm-hmm.
subject, but it is more like, I'm trying to imagine what universe we are going through a list of waivers and approving them, and this is then one that is relevant, because by
Mm-hmm.
definition, we are making it irrelevant. So eventually, I guess, this probably comes off of the list.
yeah.
But I agree that I think it would make sense for us to think carefully about the earth removal and how it fits into the conditions that we're setting for the
In
project.
which case, I appreciate its inclusion now,
Right.
so that we know
Yes.
the importance of the conditions later.
This was not a wasted conversation.
Yeah.
So, yes, thank you. All right, let's keep going.
Just quickly, signs
Yeah.
and lighting, we talked about lighting previously, and in terms of signs, we plan to submit signs as part of an updated architectural set, I believe, and also the civil plans will show the location, which would be 2 ground signs as well as 3 banner signs. And so we'll present those for the board's review. And so then we'll modify this waiver request based on that to the extent it's required.
And these signs, I believe from what I read of the waiver proposal here, these are not internally illuminated signs, right?
I don't think that they would be, no.
Okay. That is a slightly touchy subject
Yeah.
in this town, so I just wanted to
Right,
check.
right. No, I think they would be consistent with what we have out here today in East and West Mill anyway, so I think that's the intent.
So would you not have to get a sign permit, or you just wouldn't have to get a variance for a sign permit?
Well, I think we'd request a waiver for the dimensional requirement and then have the board issue a sign permit subject to us meeting our standards, so the building inspector would need to make sure that we meet the specifications that we've,
But the building inspector would still issue the sign permit, right?
we'd issue the building permit, which would be the sign permit would be a part of it.
But they're asking for a waiver from the normal rules for the sign.
Yeah.
Because I assume it'll be larger
I've
and
just never
closer
seen it.
to the edge than normally allowed by the bylaw? Is that the?
I think in this case, some of the signage bylaw is pretty restrictive in the.
Yeah. I think the
both in
industrial-
number and in size, but I think you'll find that our design will be consistent with what Avalon Bay did at the entry to the subdivision road, to the entry to the lot.
I get-
That's what we're using as a precedent.
Yeah, I guess I just.
All of this will be explored further when they submit an actual plan for the sign, right? Because we don't have enough specifics really to delve into this one right now.
Well, just on the process, though, I have never, in pulling a building permit for a commercial building, even when we show signs on it, I've always had to pull a separate sign permit. So, are you saying the building permit includes a sign permit, or?
I would think so unless town council has.
The comprehensive permit, so going back to some earlier comments, this board acts in place of all local boards on all local permits. So the building inspector is still going to issue a building permit because that's under the state building code.
Right.
But sign permits, everything else is all issued by this comprehensive permit. So you could set limits on illumination, limits on height, number of signs, location, setbacks.
Okay. So this is in lieu of getting a
Yes.
permit?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, okay.
We are.
You're essentially issuing it as part of issuing the comprehensive permit.
Do we have a timeline for when we'll see a sign proposal? Because presumably if we're gonna be. Yeah, presumably if we're gonna be voting on all of this, then we need to see what we're voting on.
Yeah, I'd like to think, I don't know, Ed, we did a brief discussion of this thing. In a week?
Yeah.
We can just put together the
So by the
specification
next
on that.
meeting,
Yeah.
we can have something.
I was
Well
gonna
before.
say, and we'll talk more on this towards the end of the meeting, but like, I would prefer if basically we can get all relevant documents in by the 20th, right? Because that will give us enough time to distribute things out to board members. I know we also have some, Terry may be on leave for some of that, and so we can work on who it will be that will distribute that. But like, if it comes in by the 20th, I feel confident that we can get it to the board members and they'll have some time to look at it. But especially if, there's a possibility of us voting on the 30th. I don't think that's a guarantee, but if there's a possibility of us voting on the 30th, I would like us to all be able to be comfortable with what we're looking at.
Next are the dimensional, which is a bit of the more complex. I think town council has done a great job on the draft decision, sort of identifying sort of how it would be handled. Because we're in a split zone and an overlay district, it's very difficult to pinpoint all the waivers with complete accuracy. I know that Judy doesn't like handling it that way, but it's, from a practical standpoint, the board's gonna see exactly where those setbacks are on the plan. But, what I've included, again, the District A includes a set of waivers from that district, the district setback requirements, which are a bit complex and convoluted. I won't go through them this evening unless you want me to, but.
I don't think we need to go through them in detail.
Okay.
But it's more just, I appreciate Ms. Barrett's hesitation on this because it's basically just saying, okay, just look at the picture.
right? And I think having an actual list would be really helpful as part of what we vote on.
Yeah.
You know, even if it makes it somewhat Byzantine and difficult to navigate, I think it is useful to have it physically written down.
So,
Even
Well-
if it requires 6 complicated footnotes.
I have an academic background. I like footnotes.
No,
what
I-
can I say?
I agree, I was just making it lighter.
yeah, so I mean, the 30-foot, 35-foot setback under sub-district A, it applies to, I mean, there's no front setback under the sub-district A. It's a 35-foot perimeter when you're set back against a residential district that's not in sub-district A. And so that's the explanation for that. But
I understand that I understand it's challenging, and I understand it's not necessarily intuitive, but as long as we're confident that we can make it correct, I'm okay with that.
Sure. Then the industrial S, which is the bottom half of the site, we have, you know, the dimensionals identified and whether waivers requested and so on. And then followed by that is the R4 district as well, which has identified the waivers and so on. I do need to have a discussion with our civil engineer. There might be a couple items that I want to clean up on this as well, but for the most part, I think we're in pretty good shape on those waivers. And then the next item is, again, dimensional requirements where we have our yards, building height, lot coverage, and floor area. We've requested a waiver for for the same reason, because each of those provisions requires us to be in compliance with the zoning requirement in Table 2. That's the only reason why. So that's the explanation for that. Then supplemental regulations, the parking requirements, I think we've discussed that a little bit this evening. And
Keep going.
I don't know if town council wants to discuss the parking at all, but in terms of that waiver, we've discussed it already this evening a little bit in terms of what the intent is.
Help me understand what we're looking at here, because what my very uninformed reading of this one is that you're asking for a waiver for all 467 units, for all 467 spaces. Is that a correct assessment?
Well, we're asking for a waiver, well, we'll have 462 spaces on site. We'll have the ability to use 467 spaces, whether they're, and all those spaces would be shared with the other commercial spaces, given the fact that our parking study says, number one, that all those spaces can be available at various peak hours and that we have excess spaces. So there's no reason to restrict those parking spaces at all. And so I know that we had that discussion very early on, and there was a concern about that, but I think that our traffic engineer and also VHB confirmed that they didn't see an issue with the parking on the site such that there was a need to restrict. I know it may sound counterintuitive, but
So I mean, I guess when we talked about it before, right? My concern is that if you declare all 462 of them shared spaces, that if you do something else, some other modification to the property, that you get to basically double count all of those spots, right? And so I think that's my concern is that then we're not so much that we can't handle it now, but that we're basically setting up a space where you are cleared to do things that we have not felt we can approve. And so that's where I was looking to be more restrictive.
Well, whether we're before this board or whether before the planning board, we're going to have to demonstrate adequacy of parking. And I think that before the planning board, what we've always done is we've been able to successfully contend, based and backed by parking studies, that we had adequate parking and that shared parking was appropriate. And I think that's what we're going to continue to do with the planning board. And if we had to come back to the zoning board of appeals for a similar reason, we would certainly be able to do that as well.
But I guess my point is that I think approving this many spaces might preclude you from having to come back to us in the first place. And maybe, Ms. Murray, maybe you can weigh in of whether I'm mistaken in that understanding.
No, Mr. Chair, and actually, Attorney Smolak and I had a little bit of conversation about this, and I don't think we actually came to any resolution other than, well, we'll get some more feedback here. But my thought initially was, if you've got 462 spaces in your garage and on your surface parking, and you need 467, I think along the lines that you were just saying, Mr. Chair, why not have those 462 on site reserved for this particular 40B, and then we're only really looking for 5 other spaces to be shared.
Right, or, you know, you decide that like some fraction of them are available to be shared coming in, right, but
That's
that
true,
it's
too.
not 100%, right? Because what I worry about 100% again is just that then if you add something to the rest of the facility that requires more parking, well, now this is not a thing that you have to ask for a waiver or permission or variance or whatever, you know, version of it that comes forward coming, you know, in the future. And so to me, I do worry that if we're too broad here, we can be getting ourselves into trouble later.
Well, I disagree. I think that basically RCG would be controlling that parking garage with the key fob system, number one. So he can control, RCG can control what comes in and comes out of that garage. Number two, if there's anything new that's being proposed, that has to go before some board to approve any change in parking or in changes in use. But
Would the
there's,
fob be issued to everybody in the mill complex? If it's intended to all be labeled as shared parking, and there would be a fob on the garage, would everyone in the mill complex have a fob that would work for that parking garage?
That's not how we do it now. I don't think that's the intent. And I don't think the intent is to build more residential to share with residential. So that question of saying, you know, can you just do whatever you want, right? The idea of the shared parking is there's a vast majority of commercial now. The commercial would be able to share when the parking is available, and that principle, when we do, if we were to, I think, as John's saying, if we were to come back to try to do some other project in the future, would it arbitrarily, you know, be able to use this parking? I'm not sure that's
Let
what
me
we're
propose a
saying.
hypothetical, just to help us along here, right? Let's say that you say that one of those parking lots, one of those satellite parking lots, you decide, okay, I'm actually going to want to build a new commercial building on that spot, right? And so you're right, you would have to come to the planning board to talk about that building, right? But you would be able, in there, to basically say, well, the parking's covered, don't worry about it, we've already accounted for the numbers, we're well over, right? And because we added a whole, you know, an extra, say, 300 spots over what you actually needed in this setup. And so I guess my concern is that scenario, right? Whereas I would rather you say, actually, well, we're going to build this on top of the spot, a bunch of spots are going away, that now puts us over a limit, and we have to specifically ask permission for the new spots. And so I guess I don't know enough to know how you would write either the waiver or conditions to line up with this, but I feel like there's got to be something we can do to be a little bit more specific here.
but we have hundreds and hundreds of spaces that are unoccupied at peak hour, so that there's absolutely no need to regulate, even if we had the desire to put in additional commercial. I mean, David regulates it today. The way that he manages it today, he regulates it. And the commercial is, you know, being on this site 6 days a week, I could tell you hardly anyone parks in that garage except when it snows. That's the only time.
Like I said, I get it with
So-
regards to if you build the thing now, I agree with you, right? But it's the what are we doing for the future and how are we laying this out?
I also think that maybe what you just said is kind of proving the chair's point, is that if nobody really parks there until it snows, then there's not actually a need for 497 shared parking spots, right? So like, if we can find a more limited number that we can designate as shared parking, so that we can say in the future that we intended the use of this to be as stated here, and not you know, committing future projects before they've even gotten off the ground or even been dreamed. Because as you said, you know, like this parcel was not dreamt to be this not that long ago. So we can't predict what will happen in the next 10 years for what might seem like a great idea. But what we can say is if there's truly not a need for this to be shared parking, then maybe we don't grant a waiver for shared parking. Or as high of a waiver.
The need is different from the zoning. So I think the point is that the zoning demands a lot of parking for any use. So we could look at this a different way, which is say, do we need this much parking for this project? And are there other things in the zoning, like that we can use neighborhood parking that we're not talking about? So what we're asking for is from, you know, the zoning respect, since we were required to have a whole bunch of spaces for commercial uses by your underlying zoning, and we're required to have a whole bunch of spaces for residential uses by your underlying zoning. It's not efficient to actually separate those. And then every time we've done a project previously, we've recognized that and done a special permit to understand that shared parking. So we're just asking for the same principle to be applied universally to this that we've applied to the other projects.
And I think that is fine, again, for what you need to comply to the zoning, right now. But not necessarily to set you up so you don't have to come back in the future. Because again, in the future, if you want to build something, then come back to us, we'll talk it through, and we can come up with a new waiver, a new variance, a new whatever, right? Like special permit. And so I guess that's the, like,
To be fair, I do think that like in a future development case, it seems unlikely that this board or the planning board would simply accept the idea that, oh, on paper it says we have enough spaces, therefore we don't need a parking study, like a real-time parking study.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't mean to interrupt.
That was
So,
spitballing.
the spaces in the new garage, do you need those to satisfy, so you stay in compliance with permits for other buildings on the properties?
Right, we would have, we have shared, no, that's in the other direction.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
this
this
parking lot
project
has
is
historically
shy of
been used, even though, as you can see, it's not practically used, historically been used to satisfy underlying zoning requirements.
Right.
Because we always had this
So how
surplus.
many
We'd like to be able to use it in the same way that it's a surplus, essentially parking area that can help us satisfy zoning requirements, even if there's not as much of a practical use.
But the question is, and this is the question that we started with months ago, is how many units do you need to share onto this property in order to comply with all of those zoning
Like
requirements?
with
time of the
100
day?
surface unit.
Well,
Well, we're not,
No, to comply
we're
with
not talking
zoning,
about
right?
actual, we're talking about zoning, so that doesn't matter
So
what time of day.
time of day is not relevant, right? And so is it 150? Is it 200? Right, because I think we can grant the waiver that is required to make it so that everything meets zoning, but I don't think we want to grant more than that.
So like previously, there were 100 surface spaces, and I can't remember how many are in the parking
600
garage.
in the parking garage.
600 currently.
Presently on two-story parking.
What's the new parking garage gonna include?
The new parking would be 362.
So if we put the limit at the existing number of parking spaces, that would presumably meet current zoning.
But that's more than what's here.
Right.
Right, the existing number of parking spaces is more than what's going to be in the new
We'll be
development.
giving them a bigger waiver.
So,
But even under zoning, we don't need the full 600.
If you've been following the news, I mean, a lot of municipalities are eliminating parking. I know it's a,
Yeah,
it's a,
but
those
that's a whole
are,
other issue.
those are urban locations.
not
with-
necessarily all urban areas.
Well,
I'm with
Some of
you
them, you're
on
right.
the irrationality of our parking regulations. I get it. I'm fine with that. But like, the goal here is to grant you the waiver, assuming we vote for it in the affirmative, to grant you the set of waivers you need to build this facility. I don't think I'm really interested in the 40B process being used to build something bigger or to grant more than that.
can I ask you, the 362 that are in the new garages going in, would that be for residents only, or would somebody like,
No, we would use, during daytime, we would expect some commercial tenants would have access to the garage.
would you have to have that? Could you keep those 362
Well-
specifically for the residents?
In a practical sense, we could, but I think part of what John's talking about is as the market changes, right? If we have empty parking spaces in a garage during the day, it would seem sensible to move cars, be able to let cars park in the garage. There's a preference, right? So there's some people now when parking lots are empty, they park in the garage for the reasons of shade, of snow, or other reasons. So we'd continue to regulate that. We want as much flexibility as possible to manage the site and who parks where. And so we do some of that now with different colored tags, and some of those people are allowed to park on the Eastmont parking garage, some of them are not. It would continue to function like that. Like in a practical sense, we keep rights to move cars around and keep the parking, as much parking available and convenient.
And could we put a stipulation, maybe a condition in the management plan that part of the consideration for how you manage parking on an ongoing basis is ensuring that ample parking is left to the residents of this building so that there's not a perceived need of the residents to park on Prescott, for instance? I guess that is, because like in not ensuring that there is enough space, like not making it a possibility that the garage be reserved for the residents, I feel like could also set us up for a future problem.
That's how town council hasn't seen it yet, but that's how I've drafted a potential condition for parking.
I suspect that I'm going to go around in circles with you guys on this a little bit. But what I would like to request is maybe a way to help clarify things, is the number that would be required in order to comply with zoning. And the reason is that, look, if that number is 450, then the difference between 450 and 467 is not one that I care about. If the answer is 20, I think it does matter, right? And so that would be a very helpful number for me to have if that's possible to obtain.
It's 467 to comply with zoning for
No,
that,
no, no.
for the,
That's the number that
For the
the apartment
residential.
building requires on site. What
Yep.
I mean is the number of sites that would require to be shared onto the residential site from the rest of the complex in order to make the complex fit with
Yep.
zoning. If I could get that number, I think it helps the conversation a lot, right? Because, again, if we're talking about the difference of 30 spots, 40 spots, then it becomes ridiculous to try to, like, micromanage this, right? But if it's a huge difference, then I think I am going to push kind of hard for us to keep that number a bit lower. Ms. Murray, Ms. Barrett, do either of you have any particular thoughts on this?
No, I think, Mr. Chair, you're asking the correct question, because we're sort of chasing a number here. And allowing too big a waiver, too small a waiver might upset other uses throughout the mill complex. So I think we do need to know what the impact is here.
Well, okay. Is this a waiver that could impact the size of the project or number of units of the project? If they need this project to provide shared spaces in order to keep the commercial spaces compliant, and the commercial spaces don't have any privileges under 40B, then, I mean, if we didn't approve this, unless they reduce the number of units, would that be a?
So, Ms. Barrett,
Well-
I think is,
Bursting at the seams to say
Yeah.
something. So.
would you like to bring a microphone over to?
I have to speak as a planner right now. Your parking requirements in this town are excessive.
Okay.
They are very high.
Yeah.
Shared parking is a best practice in planning. My opinion is what the applicant's proposing is reasonable.
Okay.
As a planner, that's
Sure.
my view.
No, that's helpful.
These parking requirements are, I see the assistant town manager here for planning.
Well,
You guys need to look at this. I'm sorry, I think you already know this. I don't want to lecture anybody, but these are higher than actually I see in most towns.
Okay, but I can tell you that some of the commercial businesses on Water Street, which abut the other parts of this, are just getting creamed because of parking on Water Street from this development. So, in actuality, it is hurting other businesses and residences.
I just
I'm
have
not
to
sure
speak as
I
a planner.
disagree.
Yeah.
I think they're benefiting because East Mill and West Mill are there. They're getting customers that they never would get otherwise, because now they're getting foot traffic.
No,
Yep.
no, I'm referring,
To
I don't
businesses.
want to say who, but.
I know exactly who you mean.
Yeah, and I don't know that that person gets any extra business from the,
But I would like to say, they've never done a study, right? They've never presented a fact to back that up. Because I've never been on Water Street and not been able to park. It's also public parking, so we're not parking on their property. We're sharing parking on a public street for commercial
we'll-
uses, for both sides. There's people that live there, there's people that work there. We could say the same thing about them. They're parking in spaces that we're entitled to because we're on that block and we pay taxes, right?
that's
So I think that's an unfair comparison to this example. But I also want to point out.
I think it's a comparison when you're talking about the parking requirements in the town, because if the development provides all enough suitable amount, then they don't have to go park in the public spaces.
I mean, technically,
leaving them
Frank,
open.
they don't have to park on Water Street. It's just more convenient. Like, there is other parking in the complex. So like, that seems like a
I understand, I
proximity
understand all that.
design issue,
I'm
not,
talking reality versus,
right, but the parking spots are available on the complex. Like, I've never not seen an available parking spot in the mill complex. It's just that,
because they're all parked on Water Street.
Well, it's
No,
because
'cause
when the
it's not
zoning was
convenient.
enacted, that area was dead. Water Street was dead in 2007, and 2009, 2010. And now it's changing a little bit.
yeah.
But like David said, I've never had a problem finding a space on Water Street if I had to park down there. So, but people
I
can
think that's
differ.
a slightly different practical question, but I also want to point out that shared parking's been allowed by a special permit on an unlimited basis every time we did market rate housing on the site. Just so the public knows that. When we've done housing on site, knowing that there's sufficient parking from the commercial side, and that shared parking principle sort of makes sense, as a special permit, not as a variance, not before this board, it's been allowed because it's a practically reasonable solution. And I think we shouldn't treat a project that incorporates affordable housing principle differently from how we've treated the market rate projects that we've done on this site.
That was the comment I was going to add, is there's an equity consideration.
All right, let's keep going, because we are at 9 o'clock, and we have not even started talking about conditions yet, so.
Let's see.
I didn't see conditions on the agenda for tonight. I thought we were just talking about waivers.
No, we have the.
Were they on there?
Draft conditions, yeah.
Did not read it.
Draft conditions list for development.
Gotcha.
Well, in fairness to town council, I just sent her draft conditions today.
Well, and these are
But-
not going to be complete, but it is
Yeah.
more to talk about some key questions that we might have.
So just quickly, location and layout of parking facilities. This is a waiver because it talks about parking shall be provided on the same lot except by special permit, and so those provisions request to be waived. Special permits for parking, that's related to the note 1 that I had. Site plan review is a special permit, we don't have to talk about that. Supplemental regulations, screening and landscaping of off-street parking areas, all of which can be modified by special permit. There are some requirements on the commercial side for the areas that are zoned commercial versus residential. We could discuss that later because of time. Lot slope requirements, I'll just reconfirm that we don't have any lot slope issues. I'll reconfirm that with our civil engineer.
Okay,
Maybe
and
we
then
can
we'll
withdraw
remove
that.
That one, I assume, is assuming that there's no issue.
We may not have one, yeah. Inclusionary zoning, we're requesting a waiver for that. That's a special permit.
You're superseding those
Right,
requirements.
correct. And then the last 3 are administrative, basically requiring compliance with zoning. The last 2 are administrative, compliance with zoning as modified by any waivers that the board may grant. And the last one is just a general special permit section. And then lastly are 3 three minor items related to the local 40B rules, which aren't really substantive, so.
All right, thank you. So, Ms. Murray and Ms. Barrett, I did ask you both to take a look at these and just sort of any other areas. Obviously, we talked about parking, but any other areas there where we think we need more specificity in the waivers?
Yeah, can I just come back to the building permit one? You're doing this in phases, right? So are you planning on building one permit for the entire thing or separate permits for each phase?
I would think we'd be pulling a separate permit for each phase.
Yeah, just because
So
of
it's just
timing, right?
yeah.
There's a limited time. that
No,
you
I
can-
understand.
No, no, I'm just trying to understand, because I don't
Well,
have experience. you do.
mainly because if they pulled a permit for the entire thing and they only finished half, they couldn't get a CO.
All right, we got some comments here.
So and roughly what the timing be between phases? Can you imagine?
It'd just be sequential, but I think
Yeah.
I think they run into issues if you have it under one permit and you haven't completed a building under that permit.
So just
So-
for the board and people to understand, when the board issues, if the board issues a comprehensive permit for this case, at the number of units the applicant has proposed, those units will all go on the subsidized housing inventory after you file the decision with the town clerk. If the units are not all under a building permit within 12 months, the units that are not under construction will come off the subsidized housing inventory and will be restored to the SHI when there's a building permit pulled. So I just want you to understand, you may end up, at 10% or darn close to it, but then fall down and then go back up again. It's just the nature of a multi-phase project.
And each
Wait, you
phase would
can't just put it
comply.
up overnight? That seems crazy.
I'm just telling you what the regulations say.
I'm kidding.
I was just going to point out, each phase would comply, each building's designed to comply on its own with the amount of affordable housing in each and the number of 3 bedrooms and the other requirements.
Totally understand, and that's not why I'm raising this. It's just a question of how the town
Safe
anticipates
harbor,
being, a safe harbor question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how does that,
So if you pull one-
impact us if someone sneaks in once they come off the list and now we're at 9.5 and someone else throws a 40B at us? How does that work?
So just ask the town of Brookline, because that's the position they've been in for 7 years. Up and down and up and down, and then when they fall down, another application comes in. It's just the nature of this rule is intended to make sure that a comprehensive permit's one thing, but getting the housing built is another. So there's an interest from the state's perspective in making sure that you don't have a community that's staying at 10% for, ad nauseum, when in fact the units don't exist.
So, once we approve this, it goes on the list, then they have to get a building permit
Within 12 months,
within 12 months.
yes.
Or else it comes
Or the units come off, and then they are restored once there's a building permit issued.
But if they pull two separate building permits, does it only get applied towards the number of units in that phase?
Nothing will happen for a year. It's at the end of 12 months that
Well, if
the
they're doing
rule,
one after the other,
So
the second phase 2 is not going to be started
I'm
until.
just trying to explain the rule,
Yeah.
that's all.
I think Mr. Killay's asking, if there's 3 phases, 2 of them after 12 months are complete, but the third one is not. The first 2 phases continue to count.
Yes, they do.
And then the third one now does not.
That's correct.
Okay.
Anything that's built
Until the
currently
permit
counts.
is pulled.
Yes, sir.
I will add that in terms, that's a very good point that Ms. Barrett has identified. The other point I just wanted to make in terms of phasing, typically the phasing would be in our construction management plan, once we have that together. So, I don't think we have a full plan together at this point in terms of phasing, so I would assume the board might condition it in that way, when we have a better grasp of the phasing.
I would like to continue back to where we were, which was leaning on Ms. Barrett and Ms. Murray with any other concrete things that you folks would be looking for.
So I shared my comments with with Carol, and I think I'm going to defer to her, but basically, conditions that sort of say, as shown on the plans. I would like to see more specificity. I think Attorney Smollett probably knew I was going to say that, but those were the main ones, just wanting to tighten that up.
Yeah.
And along those lines, and I've gone through and annotated, and I can certainly circle back with Attorney Smollett about some specifics, because precisely that. I always look at this as 12, 24 months, however many months from now, when RCG is at the counter at the building department with their building permit application, and your building inspector is trying to figure out, all right, you're allowed 17.5 feet off of which lot line? And you say you got a waiver from the 25-year storm event under the stormwater permit, but is there a different year storm that you designed this to? And just things of that nature, just to button this up a little bit more.
Yeah, and I think along those lines, right, like I would like the building inspector to be able to say, okay, this plan that they've got, now they've started staking it out, now it is the correct distance, rather than trying to look at a picture and a map and, even with measured distances, trying to say, okay, does this actually fit, right? I think it'll be easier if there's just a number and you can draw a tape measure or wheel or whatever it is across it and actually measure that distance. So I agree.
Well, I guess I have a question.
Yeah.
And I've never done a project in this town, so I don't know. But for instance, Haverhill will only issue a foundation permit, and then you have to turn in an as-built, and then they'll issue a building permit. Does North Andover, Jim, you've gotten permits here, did we?
No, I've never had to do an as-built here.
So you pull one permit that
permit,
includes
yeah.
foundation, and
Yeah.
Haverhill's the only one I know who does it that way,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I just didn't know if that was a,
Normal thing.
well, I know it's not normal other places. I didn't know if
Yeah.
North Andover was also the oddball. I guess not. Okay.
I did have to in Winchester, but I didn't have to in North Andover, so, but,
Yeah.
All right.
how many phases do you think it's gonna be?
Essentially 3 phases, because we'd build the parking garage first, then building 1, then building 2.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess to the question, what are the odds that all 3 will be pulled by 12 months? I'm guessing probably not all 3, right? I would guess 1, maybe 2.
I could see building 1 in the garage would highly likely be pulled together versus just building the garage with nothing to attach to it at that point. The other one being pulled within 12 months, not sure, because it'd probably be more than 12 months to build the first 2, and so it'd be a question of working with the building commissioner about,
And just,
Well, you got months to go before you finish the plans.
I mean, just to be clear, it's not really the board's problem, it's not the applicant's problem, it's how the town outside this room views the subsidized housing inventory.
Right, but, we have some stewardship on behalf
Sure.
of the town here, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Sure.
I do, like, whether or not I accept there are certain practical realities, right, of like what is and is not possible, and I'm not interested in like trying to restrict things just to make this happen. It is more just, okay, where are the lines and how close to the lines are we getting and those kind of things, and we can do some math on there to figure that out.
There's also the possibility, there's certification of the plan production plan. I mean, that might be a possibility too.
Right. They could certainly, I imagine, qualify for housing plan certification, but just bear in mind that if units come off the inventory after 12 months, that certification may be at risk. That has also happened in other communities. So I'm just trying to be honest with everybody about how this all works.
Yeah, no, thank you.
So, but you could pull a permit for the garage and building 1, start construction within that 12-month period, or at that 12-month period, pull the second permit, ask for a 6-month extension, you get 6 months, maybe it would be another year before you started building 2. I just don't want to have an issue, or try not to have an issue, that after the 12 months, between 12 and 24 months before you start the second building, that's all. So if there's some way to try to pull that second permit,
Is that a condition we can even put on there?
I don't think that that's a reasonable requirement. I think that that's asking for a lot of trouble.
Because
So
I
for
think that's,
informational purposes, the minimum threshold for a one-year certification in North Andover is 59 units, and for 2 years, it's 119. So in theory, you know, if they pulled a permit for 120 units, you know, and not the rest, your housing plan certification would not be jeopardized because you would have met the threshold for 2 years. So, you know, just so everybody
Okay,
understands,
so
it's,
that's helpful. So that puts my mind a little bit at ease here. Okay.
is there a reason why building 1 would be constructed before building 2?
I think it'd be better to screen the garage from Prescott and High as far as the aesthetic of the project versus having the garage be prominent in a building behind it as the
It would be
first.
much further away. I guess, like, in, like, is there a chance that, like, the project runs out of funding or something and, like, the last phase doesn't get done?
In which case it would be better for phase 2 to be done,
And
because it's
not
further
phase 1?
away.
All right. I think this is getting a little bit esoteric at this point.
Okay.
And we're getting late. But, all right.
Sorry, how long is a comprehensive permit good for? Like, special permits, variances have 3 years. So if they start it with a phase 1 permit and have,
they've activated the permit.
okay.
All right. So let's talk conditions. You know, I think we've gone through a few iterations already. That you gave us some drafts with some questions on it. I know you've been getting feedback. I also, like, in addition to Mr. Smolak sending you information, I also just sent you something from Conservation earlier today from Amy Maxner. A side note on that, actually, I should just mention before we get too much into this, there was a review by Conservation Commission, or Conservation Administration on the possible wetland, and that was found to be smaller than jurisdictional. So that's not a thing that we have to consider. It's not a thing that we have to write waivers for. So we can put that aside for the moment. But yeah, so there's some feedback from various places. So obviously this is not a complete document yet. But I think what I would like to do is use this space for us to discuss areas that you feel are in the air or ambiguous or not fully answered yet, so that you have the proper guidance to be able to write what you need to write. And so what kind of feedback do you need from us at this point?
So, Mr. Chair, unfortunately, it's been about 3 weeks, I think, since I last looked at that document, and I did not bring a copy with me this evening. I think a lot of it is going to be addressed, quite frankly, through the waivers.
Okay.
And a sense of, with the revised plans, which direction the board might be inclined to go. And certainly you got even further revisions tonight. That kind of usually helps inform, like, once you start voting on waivers, or at least reviewing the waivers, and if there's no strong objection, it kind of helps bring this all into focus.
Yeah.
And drives the conditions, because if you're willing to grant a waiver subject to something, you know, like, for example, I'll pick an easy one. Yes, they've requested some extensive waivers from your local stormwater and land disturbance bylaw, but they're going to comply with Mass DEP Stormwater Handbook. You might be inclined to grant the waivers from the local bylaw as long as there is indeed compliance with the state's requirements, things like that.
Okay. I guess so I'm thinking about the timeline, right? So we have a deadline for 30th of June currently. Our next meeting is going to be the 30th of June. And so that does not give us a ton of time to
consider things. And I don't want us to be locked into having to close the public meeting at the end of that day, no matter what, because if we need more input from you or you want to give more input to us, I want to make sure we have that opportunity. And so what I'm going to ask from the applicant is if you're willing to grant a 2-week extension from there, and that hopefully that is the last we need to do, so that if we get to close the public meeting that day, that would be ideal. But if we are not able to, that we have some leeway, because otherwise, if it's the 30th and we're having the meeting, we decide by the end of it we need to continue, it's going to be, we don't have a way to file that paperwork in time, and then it becomes a
Is
default.
there any way we can make it more than 2 weeks? I'm going away for a lot of July, so like.
Well, and I'm going away for the second half of July.
Right,
And
so.
I don't think it's reasonable for us to extend it beyond that. I think what I would hope is that we can have one more session at most after that, and then close the public meeting, and then we have 40 days to deliberate amongst ourselves. Well, amongst ourselves in public, but like we have 40 days to deliberate. So we would have a month and a half basically to add on.
You should make sure that we can be able to have a meeting within those 2 weeks,
Yes.
right? The venue. And, because we got 4th of July week there, and so that might be tough,
Venue, I
but-
think we can do, but I will make sure that we find the time in there. I think board availability is trickier, right? Because like a lot of us are going to be on vacation and things like that, and I appreciate that. I would love it if we can wrap up on the 30th, but realistically, I look at this and I say we have a lot of work to do, right? Like there's that we have some narrowing down of the waivers that we need to do. We have some discussion.
Well, we're still getting plans that we haven't
We're still
seen yet.
we're still getting plans that we haven't seen yet. We don't have a list of conditions that are full and complete, right? And
Frankly, I think it's unrealistic to think that even 2 weeks after the next meeting, with the fact that we haven't seen a sign plan, we haven't seen a final landscape plan at all. And frankly, I'm still a little bit thrown by the fact that there was not, I thought there was an existing tree between Prescott and this, and there's not. And it's 17 feet from the property line there. That's really close and really high. And it's like, I feel like we need, like there's a lot that we just literally have not even set eyes on. So 2 weeks from now to then finish feels not just ambitious, like not possible. And then 2 weeks after that feels ambitious. Like, you know what I mean?
If I may comment,
Please.
if the board gives permission between now and the next hearing, and I understand the 20th was the time frame you wanted full information, but in that time, I'd like to have the ability to work with town council to work on some potential modifications to the draft decision that you have, and to put the board in a position to because my concern is that you're going to end up in August, and that's just ridiculous. I think that my suggestion is that if we could try to wrap this up in July, the first 2 weeks of July, we can have all the plan information to you probably in.
Well, I think you pointed out two things that are pretty small things for us to do. Present the signs, the sign plan, and the landscape plan is there. I think it's just going to show a few more trees along the property line that we're trying to preserve. I don't think those are difficult to provide in a week's time. I'm wondering what beyond that would be,
If we discuss, right, you give them to us, but then we don't discuss it with you until the 30th. And if it triggers a change, then we need time to come back to us with it.
And I think, are those the two things that we're,
Yeah, I mean, I think
that's
those
what
are
I have as
relatively
notes.
small on the scale, right, of
Just
things that we're
just
asking.
the waivers.
I mean, am I the only one who still has qualms about the setbacks on Prescott?
I don't think we're going to move the setbacks any further.
I mean, I think, so I think there's the qualms, right, which is that you have the ability to vote no, right? But I think the applicant has made clear that they don't intend to move the building back.
Sure.
So it's us
basically at this point, we have a thumbs up or thumbs down on it. And so you can have qualms.
I mean, it
and
was
you
also
can
made
be-
clear that they wouldn't move on 39 Prescott. So I guess, yeah, I feel like
They haven't said they wouldn't move, I just thought, and I think they said that the 35 might be tough, but
I believe it was said it was a non-starter.
No, that was going back to the dimensions of the
The
garage.
setback.
That was going back to the comment that was made that, to move it back to the existing garage.
Right, which
Location
now
was
is,
45
which
feet.
in the setback in that closest area now is,
But not
I believe. But for that closest area where the waiver is needed, yeah. I don't know. I feel maybe that the renderings were a little misleading, so I'm still having a lot of,
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's a matter of deliberation,
okay.
right? Like that and I do think that we need to think through these things and talk through these things, but we can close the meeting before we get to that point.
Yeah, if we feel that there's definitely never, like, not a single way to continue the negotiation there.
I mean, what you're hearing now is clearly we have board members who are uncomfortable with that distance, right? And so I think that's on you guys to decide, are you willing to move that back to make that more possible?
I hear you.
I don't think at this point in the design process, we're going to be moving the footprint of the buildings around anymore. I also think, this is a question for the waiver. In the sub-district A, there's no required setback to the street, so I'm not sure if
Well-
we're in
Well,
violation.
in one part there is, but in another part there isn't. In the IS, there is a 0 setback. So,
I mean, from the waivers list, it looked like there was a waiver required for a 17-foot setback along Prescott. Was I misreading that
that was just for
waivers
the
list?
R4 district.
Is that not the part that's across the street from the houses on Prescott?
I don't think it's from the public way. Our 17.5-foot setbacks from the public way, we have a 35-foot setback from an adjacent property in the R4 zone. But
There's,
anyway, I think as John said, there's some waivers that are covering, since we're in underlying zones. But I think
I mean,
we,
that 17-foot setback is also followed by your full Prescott Street layout and the setback across the street, as opposed to the immediate setback for
Right.
39 Prescott,
No,
which
I
was a little
understand.
different.
What I'm trying to clarify is there is a waiver needed for that
Yeah,
setback along Prescott.
Yeah.
Correct? Yeah. And it is 17.5 feet, or it is 19.1 feet? One of those. So, yeah, I think it felt better when I thought there was a tree between them. So, do with that what you will. I'm hearing that no one else seems to have any chipping in except for that.
I'm still not clear on that, whether or not there's a setback waiver request.
There is a
There is a setback waiver along Prescott Street.
And if we didn't approve that waiver, what? They'd have to move it back, or that's too late for them to move it
No,
back?
if we don't approve that waiver, they will decide that they will probably take us to court, is what I would assume. Yeah.
So are the waivers all or nothing, or is it just that one is significant enough that it would be an issue?
It's not an all or nothing proposition. You can vote each one. Oops, sorry. You could vote them, individually, and if you deny that waiver, I think the point is that one is really integral to the project as designed. Because if you don't allow the 17.5-foot setback, and they've got to bring it in 35 feet, how do they bring it in 35 feet without losing units?
Right.
Unless they go higher.
That's the challenge.
Right.
So the board could.
But I thought we could only ask them to reduce the number of units if it was linked to a waiver.
Valid local concern.
A what concern?
Yeah.
A valid local concern.
Well, isn't that a valid local concern, having the setback?
You have to weigh that against the regional need for affordable housing.
And
Well,
it's a very high bar.
Well, we're not saying we want to have affordable housing, they just have to modify it.
Do you want to explain this or shall I?
I think it's
The
pro-
issue
I
is
feel
that
like
they
it's
end
been-
up at the Housing Appeals Committee. The Housing Appeals Committee is going to weigh the need for affordable housing at a much higher level than the setback that you're concerned about. I'm just trying to be honest with you, like,
Yeah.
that's the challenge. It's not that you shouldn't care about the setback, it's that you need to just understand as a board the legal hurdle that you face trying to justify that.
Okay, but we're not telling them they can't do affordable housing, we're just saying they might have to do a little
It's
bit
the-
less.
The Housing
No,
Appeals
it's-
Committee
yeah.
will consider the proposed project.
I think the other thing to bear in mind is this might be something like where you were looking at the setback from 39 Prescott Street, immediately adjacent to another occupied property. I think the Housing Appeals Committee would look at that differently. And the public safety concern and, rights to privacy and fresh air and open space, et cetera, that attach to that versus the remainder of the building, the 17.5 feet setback from Prescott Street. Yes, it's 17.5 feet setback, and then there's a street. So that you do have more of that space. So what is the public health or safety concern?
Well,
That comes into play to say
space there,
that,
building to building, is less than it is with the,
That's the same.
oh, it's 80 feet compared to 100.
80 feet both.
80 versus 79.9.
Yeah, so
To-
that
to
from
what, 30?
39, it's 79.9. From 24, it's
From-
80.
No, but from building to building.
Yeah, that is from building to building.
All right. I read it wrong.
We do. Is there anything else on on the condition side that we want to discuss before moving on?
I think we'll
Okay.
get more clarity on that after we figure out the waivers, right? Yeah.
All right. Let me get the list. All right, first up, we have Mr. Holland.
Chairless, I'm going to just switch out, if you don't mind, with my neighbor.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you for letting me go first.
Welcome back.
Michael Ronayne, 24 Prescott Street. Just quickly wanted to put an idea out there. Obviously, the 50% cut in size was, being sarcastic meetings ago. But I guess a reasonable ask might be the one wing that borders 39 and 24. Without talking about apartment sizes, how many people, would it be unreasonable to ask that that wing be maintained the same size as 39 and 24 height-wise, whichever house happens to be higher? That way it's not towering over the houses on Prescott Street. However they want to milk apartments out of that, change apartments throughout the rest of the building, sure, but impact-wise, I think that would drastically change how the building affects the rest of the street. And I guess that would be with the building dimensional waiver regarding height specifically. I mean, my opinion is if that wing alone could be made to look more residential with the sloped roof, et cetera, if the top of the roof is not higher than 39 or 24, whichever of those two houses happens to be taller, then the impact on the street would be drastically less. I don't think that's a completely unreasonable ask. And I'm curious to see what the other abutters think, but impression-wise, I think that would make a huge difference if just specifically that wing was made to look more residential. And then, just a side note, regarding saying no and having to go to court and et cetera, they have to pay for court too. It's a two-sided thing. So I think other parties might be uninterested in doing that as well. And cooperation might be, encouraged to avoid that as well. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask you a question before you step down? So you prefer the sloped over the flat, except only if it's smaller, or even if we can't?
The height of the building, my preference is the height of the building is not taller than 39 or 24.
Gotcha.
Look-wise, I'd prefer slope, but if the flat is going to be less high, then that's what's important. I think if that wing alone, the building has how many wings? Bunch of them. If that wing that impacts 39 and 24 is made to look more residential, the rest of the building they can change how they want within their current sizes to fit apartments and move stuff around, and that's what's going to impact Prescott Street the most.
So if I'm looking at this plan right now, they show the elevation at 156 and 39 is 153. Is that right? So there's a 3-foot difference in the height of the proposed building, of the elevation, right? That's what you're asking, right?
So the top of the building will not be up any higher than 39 is my request.
3 feet, right?
That would be 3 feet.
We're 3 feet.
And going down the rest of that wing.
Yeah, we're 3 feet
Okay.
off of that right now, right? Because, and to be clear, it's the building itself is taller from the ground
And what-
than 39 is. But
Did-
because of the slope, it's offset a bit.
Disregarding setbacks and everything, my main concern is just looking up the street. It shouldn't tower over 39, nor should it be if there was a multifamily home across the street towering over my house. It should be the height of a house, and it should look residential. And whether that changes units or whatever it may be, I think that wing is what's most important, and I'm curious to hear what other abutters think.
All right, thank you. I want to give the applicant a chance to discuss this in terms of the height and how we understand this, because, as Mr. Testa was saying, my understanding is that the building is, as is, only 3 feet above 39 Prescott.
And I'll add that that's the top floor, not the step back. The step back is 142, so it's actually, the step back is lower, right? But
Yeah, that's correct. As TAT showed in their presentation, in sort of absolute terms, the buildings are really, marginally taller than 39 Prescott. But I also think it's, the building's designed to work, right? And I think if we are starting at this point to say, whatever neighbor, whatever member of the board wants to start to redesign the building to suit an architectural preference, it puts us into a loop that we can never resolve, right? And I think we've worked hard for 6 months to scale the buildings, both to consider the neighbors, but to fit the underlying zoning in a reasonable way that can be achieved under a special permit as well. And I think at this point we're not really interested in going much further on design. We've really worked hard on the design to get it to a reasonable point. It's set back about as far back as all the other houses are set back on the street. It's a little bit taller than the other house on the street in absolute terms, but 3 feet, to take off 3 feet is to take off a floor, and starts to impact other things in the design.
Yeah, I think
Add a floor to the southeast wing?
We'd need new waivers, and we'd be crossing beyond the special permit. How it's allowed on a special permit, you might be in a high-rise code. So it really would dramatically change the project to start moving the massing around.
Sounded like the gabled view has a vote.
Well, so actually, I was going to ask on that question, is the gabled version, is that building physically taller than the flat roof one?
I think its peak, it's the same height. It's just that it doesn't step down as dramatically.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
And does that include the version with the extra gable facing Prescott? That doesn't raise it to change the roof line, right?
No, I think the impact there, though, in relation to 24 Prescott, the step down's more dramatic than the gable goes down. So that particular ridge, or that line is shorter than how the gable comes down. And especially if you add another gable up, you're actually increasing the height relative to Prescott Street on the very front.
Okay. All right. I want to keep it moving a little bit. All right, Ms. Sarni. Oh, well, you're switching with him, so you'll go third. Figure might as well hold up the bargain to the letter.
Okay. Mr. Chair and board members, we would like to begin by referencing past meetings. Mr. Steinberg states it's going to be built in phases and able to shift parking during construction on the surface lot. On the site demolition and erosion control plan 3, it has the construction fence blocking off all of those surface area parking spaces. We assume this will be the case as the project site would need to be secured with fencing per regulations. We are not for the project being built in phases, as that means many multiple times of heavy equipment, vibrations, demolition, more disruptions to the abutters. We saw in the permit draft that the applicant would need to monitor before and after of abutters' foundations. We would think that the applicant would only want to perform this task once as opposed to multiple times. Per the parking review, the mills only utilize 50% of shared parking now. Therefore, they have ample enough spaces available, and for their current residents and business employees, should not need to use that parking garage or the surface area spaces. Those should be for the residents only of this project. This leads us to the zoning bylaws. This is a new building being built. In the 40B handbook, it states negotiations are to take place, especially regarding the scale of the proposed building, architectural design changes, landscaping, and more. The abutters and residents have voiced their concerns regarding the height, setbacks, and the scale of the project. As an abutter, we oppose the height. This project does bisect the two different zoning, R4 and IS. Where this is a 40B as a residential building, it should follow the R4 zoning in the sub-district A. The height should be 35 feet, especially along the Prescott side. The setbacks should also be followed, especially along the Prescott Street sidewalk. The proposed floor ratio on the site plan proposes 1.70. Sub-district A allows a max floor ratio of 1.0. However, can go to 2.0 with a permit. We ask that this not be waived as it affects the mass of the project. A good portion of this garage is in R4. I don't believe current R4 zoning allows parking garages. A site visit didn't occur until the 5th month of this hearing, and only after that visit and this board's comments did the applicant volunteer to change the setback. The applicant does not seem interested in addressing the biggest concerns by the abutters unless this board asks. As abutters and residents, we would like our concerns and voices to be heard by this board and acted on. To put in perspective, I recently drove on 114 along Merrimack College. 2 new dorm buildings have been built. One dorm being 79,600 square feet, and the second dorm being 61,300 square feet, for a total of 141,000 gross square feet. This applicant's original proposal, one building is 157,715 gross square feet, and the other 158,738 square feet. These 2 college dorms fit into one building in this project. How is that considered residential? We encourage you to drive by. We get that he's an urban developer, but the scale does not fit a residential setting. Take the Berry Farm project. It took almost a year to complete the permitting in the 40B hearing process. As I mentioned in an email I sent, Berry Farm has 4 3-story buildings that look residential with a total of 196 units on approximately the same amount of acreage as this project. They changed the design to blend in with the neighborhood better. In fact, Berry Farm bought 28 acres and conserved 20 acres. North Andover needs to protect more spaces like that, as that's what brings people to move to this town. That project totaled nearly $40 million. This applicant submitted an estimate, purchase, and sale price of $10 million that remains within their own organization. They own the land. They purchased the East Mill in 2007 for $9 million. Town records show a value for the 6.13 acres as $3,482,600, with the land value of only $746,600. The town records also state that it's in R4 zoning. I did submit those on the website earlier today. We started by saying 170 units, then we suggested 192. We hear you, Mr. Chair, loud and clear of the density. We get it. But even at the 192, that gets us to 9.65%, only 41 units shy of the 10%. Even if we did a 196 like Berry Farms, that gets them at 9.68%, only 37 units shy. And the 192 was only a 34.5% reduction, by the way. The waivers for height and setbacks and floor ratio should not be granted. This allows for architectural changes and scale of the project to be less. We are aware something will be built. As a tax-paying resident, we hope the board listens to our objections of waivers, and if applicant states it makes it infeasible, we ask for the pro forma to be done. When looking through the minutes of the Berry Farm project, it appears the developer was willing and reaching out to abutters and made changes based on their concerns. This applicant does not seem to be hearing and willing to work with the abutters and residents. And I just want to state one other thing, was their original plan of 296 was only 4 units shy of being considered a large-scale project under Massachusetts, which would have had different regulations. And I do have a question. Are the waivers decided on before the hearing is closed? We ask only because if changes are being made, we would like to be able to continue to voice our concerns. We know we can't voice our concerns once the meeting is closed. I also have a question in regards to the retaining wall on the landscape plan that goes on Prescott Street. One, what is the height of that? And two is, I'm not really good reading it, sorry, but where does it start? Because I'm trying to figure out if the water that goes around that, if it's going to be caught in the Prescott Street catch basin that's kind of across 24 Prescott Street, or is it just going to go straight down the street to the bottom basin? And then I didn't know if they had other drainage thing going on. So that was my question regarding that. And that's it. You're welcome.
All right, Ms. Murray, on the question of how or maybe Ms. Barrett, either one of you, in terms of the process of writing waivers, right? So after we close the public meeting, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can still adjust the content of our conditions and waivers, but we just cannot get public input or applicant input at that time if we have closed the public meeting. Is that the correct statement? Yeah. Now, that's also, to be clear to everybody here, that is a choice on our part to some degree, right? We have a time at which we will have to close this meeting from a legal standpoint, but we can vote on it before we close the public meeting as part of it, or we can do it after the public meeting. My own personal preference would be that we, as close as possible, narrow down the list of waivers and conditions before we close the public meeting, because that allows us to, and then we deliberate yes or no. Now, that I can't guarantee that we won't change anything. It is possible to change things, but I will endeavor to make those changes as small as reasonable and possible. But that would be my own statement on that matter. All right. Retaining wall. Can you help us understand that retaining wall a little bit?
I don't know if Terry can bring up I don't know off the top of my head the height of that retaining wall. You know, it's dropping off. It's an area where we're dropping off from Prescott Street. All the stormwater is managed on site, so we're not forcing any stormwater back onto Prescott Street, just to answer that concern.
And that sidewalk there, does it already have a curb? like a,
The sidewalk's being rebuilt in that area in front of our property.
right, but
as part of this
currently,
plan.
do you know?
I think it's a good question. I think it's asphalt there.
Okay.
I think there is a curb
There is a curb there.
The water coming down across.
So it's already being shunted
Yeah.
down the street.
The water isn't coming from our property onto Prescott Street now. It's coming from Prescott Street onto our property now, but from different directions. But yeah, I think the stormwater management plan, addressed that pretty in a lot of detail and was reviewed by the peer reviewer. It wouldn't be on the landscape plan what the height of the retaining wall is. I think it's in one of the
S drawings?
earlier, yeah,
And it's pretty much below sidewalk grade.
right. It's
Correct.
where the
I
site
think you
is
had it in
dropping
that file,
back to
Terry.
the
You just had to scroll up.
We can, I don't want to spend, we've got very little time left. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but maybe we can get that number just to have as part of our next meeting that, I know once we're sitting down at a computer where we have a mouse, we can find it and.
Scroll up.
Hey,
Frank,
Okay,
we have,
let's let it go.
basically 10
All right.
minutes.
All right. Last on this list before we open up the floor, Mr. Holland.
Chair Lewis, Vice Chair, Craig Coleman, committee members, thanks for having me up. I want to say, I appreciate your public volunteer service on this, and so you do a lot of work. I appreciate it. But I am just really disappointed that you haven't asked for more from the applicant. We're at such a late hour. They're pressing to have this done quickly. They can't even answer some questions. And the most you've materially asked for is moving from 16 feet to 35 feet. I don't know if you've seen the picture I shared with you in my comments, but that shows you the distance from a soccer penalty kick to the goal, which is 1 foot further, 36 feet. I've also shown the goals stacked on top of each other to get to 51 feet, to show you what that looks like. To expect my neighbors to look at that, or any of our neighbors to look at that, I just think it's beyond the pale. So I guess my question is, have you narrowed down, or have you decided that this is the footprint that you're going with?
So like legally, we can't ask them for more than the 35 on that,
Right.
right? So like,
No, I'm talking about, I guess, we've gone kind of back and forth with the idea that this is some aesthetic thing or it's density only, but this is driven by health, safety, environment, real valid public concerns, public local concerns that are driven by the size of that building and the size of the cars that are being added to our neighborhood and to the streets. And so I think you're kind of pointing to the wrong thing with this. It's not density for density's sake. It's the density that drives everything else that we've talked about and that you're not responding to. And I'm just really frustrated with it at this point. Can I get the speed data for Prescott Street that we agreed to get from the applicant a few meetings ago?
I don't think we agreed to get that data.
Take a look at the minutes, because we did talk about it and you asked for it.
I asked for it, but they did not agree to give it.
I would check the minutes. They agreed to give
the
it.
volume data that we
No, the
talked
speed
about.
data as well. You can check the minutes. I don't want to dispute it
Okay.
with you right here.
Okay.
but-
Yeah, and look, I appreciate your frustration. This is a very large development on a very small piece of property, right?
Right.
And I get that, and I understand that it is, it feels like it is an enormous amount right around this part of the community. The reality, I guess, that I am trying to convey is that the legal standard by which we could possibly win an argument on this is incredibly high.
Now, are you
And-
talking about the housing court?
The what?
At the HAC? Housing Appeals Committee, where 2 cases have been won? I would totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to know further what the additional legal process is, because I would imagine that one could appeal the housing decision to a further court. And then I would imagine that also settlements are reached between parties, so that that actually does not ever get to a case. So I think that kind of information would be very helpful for the board to understand, not that you're just going against a big behemoth that you'll never win against, but that you do have legal process beyond the housing committee.
I do want to maybe emphasize that, like, a lot of times settlements are reached from my understanding, but a lot of the times those settlements are not as stringently conditioned as what we are doing here. So, like, we're trying to exercise as much local control as possible by keeping it in this room. If, once it goes beyond here, we don't have that option anymore.
So to give you an idea, like if the Housing Appeals Committee rules against us, they then get to set the terms of all the waivers that are requested. And so the conditions that we have imposed up to this point could all go out the window.
Right, but you can appeal that.
You can appeal that, but you are not likely to win those either.
Do we have that, do we have data on those wins and losses and settlements?
I mean, it's all part of
Ms.
public
Murray, maybe you
record,
can
but I
help
think
me
it's
here, but like,
unlikely.
my understanding is that the track record of communities in any of these levels is extremely poor, because the law is intentionally written to override the natural inclination of local communities to block housing.
To me, it feels like you're looking for a reason not to do something. I'm just going to be totally honest with you.
I get that.
And that is coming across pretty loud and clear. Not from everybody, but it definitely sounds that way. What's the plan for High Street and Sutton Street to deal with the new traffic?
So as it is, the developer is not making any changes to High Street and Sutton Street.
No, but
And
what's the town's plan to deal with the traffic that's going to be laid on?
I do not know what the town's plan is.
And that is a problem.
The DPW didn't raise any objections or concerns. So we solicited feedback from all of the town departments, and specifically about if they saw any issues that we should bring to this conversation, and the DPW said there were no issues
So
that they could see.
the intersection that's currently F-rated, we're going to be adding more queue to that, and there's no problem.
They did not express any concerns to us that they thought we should bring to the developer.
I think this is really just getting kind of comical.
So I want to give you an example, though. It's like if we were then to say, we disagree with our local officials, the people that we've paid to do peer reviews, we personally don't believe in any of that, so we're going to say no. And then that goes to court.
Yeah, no, I do.
You know what I mean?
I see your point. I see your point.
Like,
But also, there are lots of intersections that are rated F.
Right.
And they don't all get addressed or fixed, so that's.
So I wanted to circle to the Prescott Street sidewalk, which I've mentioned a lot. Would the developer guarantee funding for that sidewalk extension and Prescott Street repaving if town meeting doesn't approve the funding? So as a backup.
No, they would not.
Have you asked them?
Yes, we asked them at a previous
So
meeting.
what are we getting out of this? What is the community getting out of this? It doesn't seem like anything.
I'm afraid that's not what the law is designed to do, right? It is not designed to grant us things out of it. Like we've had many developments proposed in this community where people have recommended things. One of them was, unfortunately, the Royal Crest redevelopment, which would have included a friendly 40B that would have brought us over this threshold and would have provided a safe harbor, and that, among other things, would have included, a capital investment for the town, and we turned that down. And so, unfortunately, that is the flip side of that, is that when we turn things like that down, we get this development, we get the dorms that are being built on Merrimack College's campus, which were referenced earlier. And those are things that certainly this would not be happening, and that may not have been happening.
Okay. I own some responsibility too, because I hadn't heard of 40B until a few months ago when I actually was affected by it, so I own that too. Are there any articles that we could introduce in town meeting in order to make any changes to this, or are they locked in grandfathered?
This is all state law.
and it's designed specifically to override local bylaws when housing pressure dictates.
would the developer consider selling part of the land to the town in order to create a buffer zone?
That is outside of my hands to understand.
How would I follow up
would
on
be-
that?
That would be a question for the town manager.
I'm not really clear what part of the land that they would sell without then increase it, like the setbacks or what they are.
But that's not in our authority. We would not have the ability to buy a piece of land. That would be a question for the town manager.
I think I think I'm probably out of time, but the last thing I would say is that I think you're being smartly careful on getting everything buttoned down. Don't rush it, because my understanding is that, well, I don't know if this is the case, but the developer could get the permit and then sell the property to some other developer before doing the work. I would want to check that with council, but
My understanding is that if they did that, the permit would still only be for the building as proposed.
correct, but this developer would not be doing the work, and so you're dealing with a party who you have to make sure is going to live up to your standards. So it's just a,
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
and that is one of the reasons why I've been taking the attitude that we trust what is written, not what is
Appreciate that.
verbally spoken.
yep, thank you.
All right, is there anyone else from the community that would like to speak? All right, we've got
3 minutes.
3 minutes before Terry has to run out the door. Okay, all right. All right, so we can run a little bit over. Okay, you can leave at 10 as well. So the folks here that have to leave at 10 can leave at 10, but I would like to stay and hear this out if possible.
Michael Hakim, representing my son Daniel, who you met at your last meeting, resides at 55 Prescott Street with his family of 7. My comments are going to be limited to landscaping. If we could bring up that landscape plan, is that possible, please? I'm not going to dwell on earlier comments about the lack of compatibility for a 46-unit per acre development adjacent to a single-family neighborhood. You've heard it from all the other neighbors. So I'm going to just ask you about landscaping. There was mention by Mr. Steinberg, I believe, that they have changed the chain link fence to a 6-foot-high wooden privacy fence. Is that correct?
Yeah, please address the.
I'm addressing to you.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
That is my understanding, but I can confirm with the applicant afterwards.
Is there a detail of that fence on these plans?
There's a picture as an example.
Okay, may I see the picture up on the
Please,
screen?
the next slide down, or a couple slides down. There we go.
In the middle there.
Yeah.
That one. So we're talking about a solid and opaque fence.
Yes.
And the reason that is of such importance is both for the security and the privacy of the people who reside on Prescott Street and live in their backyards, especially with my family with 5 young children who play back there all the time, and their parents sometimes back with them, their mother more often than their father as he's working, and the security and privacy for them is very important. So will this fence be running along the entire boundary between the rear properties of Prescott Street and this development?
I will confirm that with the developer.
Okay.
I believe it is. I thought it was.
And Mr. Steinberg has in the past indicated his reasoning for wanting that fence to run actually on the property line. But there is a dark line behind the building on the southern, that would be the western side of that woodland, that I'm not sure what that depicts. And I don't know whether, I don't think that that's the fence, because the fence is supposed to be on the property line. But you see that? Yes, that line right there.
I think that's the existing wood line.
But we can ask about that.
Yeah.
That is correct. Existing wood line.
That's what that is. Okay. All right. So that's, the only other thing I have for you is Ms. Craig Coleman mentioned several things that take place during the course of construction on a piece of property that can affect the health and survivability of existing trees. You might also want to add to that that the excavation into soil can modify the hydrology of the soils. That the hydrology of the soils is one primary reason why plants either survive or don't. So it's possible that when they dig into the ground for the foundations, that could affect the hydrology, and it also could potentially cut root systems of those plants. So in order to have some security that the existing trees, excuse me, that they are showing you as to be maintained on the property, should they die after the fact? Should they show signs of stress, and an arborist might say that these trees, while previously healthy, probably have not much further lifespan. Is it possible to get a condition that would address replacement of those trees in the event that were to happen?
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Steinberg, a couple of things real just quick. The first question was the wood fence, is that extending basically this whole distance? Okay, so it is now all a solid fence. It is no longer a chain link fence up there. Okay. And then the second thing was that I think it was confirmed, this is the line for the
Edge of preservation of the existing woods.
Okay. And then, I'm sorry, my brain is mush at this point. The third part was about the trees, and what do we do in terms of, let's say one of these large trees dies, right? Like, obviously we can't directly replace it one-to-one because you can't move a tree that large into a place. But is there some kind of remediation plan that we can have for making sure that landscape remains filled? I guess, is there a way to structure that of like, you know, you will replant with X, Y, Z, even if it's not as big as that, it's something that someday could be or something like that, right? Is there a way that we can fill that kind of detail in?
So there are ways of, this gets into conservation all the time. If trees are removed that shouldn't be removed, there are many different ways of appraising trees and then replacing them with kind, right? So like that exists, and it makes sense for us to work with our town council to come up with a condition that has to do with, I would say, first, a tree preservation plan that would hopefully stave off the idea that any trees would die that were intended as part of this plan to be saved. And then could have, so like tree preservation plans often have like, arborists overseeing construction parts of the plan, and if there's things that are not being done according to that tree protection plan, then they would have to come back, I would think. But maybe that's a question for our town council more than anything else.
And if I may, in your draft decision, there was, I believe, a condition about landscaping that fails to thrive, that there be a continuing condition, particularly where this is going to be a rental property with some sort of property manager in charge, that we can impose a condition that anything that fails to thrive or anything that's damaged or dies is to be replaced in kind perpetually.
Including existing.
We can certainly, I think we do have to work on a tree preservation plan and incorporate that into the construction management plan, yes.
Well, I guess not just that, but if an existing tree dies 3 years later, they would plant something in its place. Of course, it wouldn't be to the same
And
scale.
that's what you mean about replacing in kind.
Right. And for an existing tree of these sizes, it would not be in kind, because you're not.
Well, you're not gonna replace a,
Right.
100-year-old tree with a 100-year-old tree.
Yeah.
But something that at least provides similar screening, similar qualities, and an evergreen replacing an evergreen, a deciduous replacing a deciduous.
Or at
And,
least
and
planting
we
a new
might,
oak that
we
can
might
go
be able
in.
to set, like,
Yeah.
minimum diameter,
Yeah, or a
requirements.
selection of it. So like, if a 30-inch DBH tree gets cut down and they're replaced with, 3 10-inch DBH, that's way too big. But you know what I mean, like,
Yeah. Quantity over quantity,
but
quality.
there are like established ways in tree preservation plans and in tree appraisal to do that.
Okay. Is there anyone else from the community that would like to come forward and speak? I just want to make sure there's no one new, and then we'll, all right. Ms. Sarni, real quick, because I do want to let people go home, but.
I forgot to ask, I did write it down. The comprehensive permit lasts 3 years.
Yes,
Okay. Are they allowed to do an extension on that?
that's a reasonable question. I do-
yes. I mean, they'd have to come to this board to
Okay.
request one. But just to be clear, once they actually get a building permit, the permit's considered exercised. So
Okay.
they don't have to finish everything in 3 years, to be clear. So if they
No,
get a.
I get that part. The only reason why I'm asking is I just didn't know if they were allowed to get an extension, because I know that there was an extension asked for the, what was supposed to be the East Mill Flats, and it had expired in January of 1st of 2020, whatever year it was, and the sale to Avalon didn't occur until April of that year, so it got built after that had expired. So, on the East Mill side. So that's the only reason why I'm asking.
But again, they would have to get permission of this board to
Okay.
extend it, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right,
Can I make a motion
to continue
close or continue?
Well, is
to,
there- Do we want to establish that if there's anything that we need from the applicant before the next meeting? So that,
so I think the first piece is that you have our permission to talk with our council and discuss negotiating some of those waivers and conditions to make sure that they're as both comprehensive and narrow as necessary. I think we need the sign plan as well, and any additional details on landscape that we've outlined here.
existing trees, plans, retaining wall, all of those details would be
Yeah.
great.
And I will also ask you for a 2-week extension, just so that we don't end up in a nightmare scenario on the 30th, trying to figure out if we can keep this meeting going. But yes, I think with that, I will let Mr. Testa make a motion to continue to the 30th.
Make a motion to continue till the 30th of June,
At 7 PM in Town Hall.
Town Hall, yep.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye. Do we need?
Aye.
There we go.
And I am an aye. All right, we are adjourned for today. Thank you.